This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City of Warrenville Public Works and Infrastructure Committee of the Whole regular meeting. It is Monday, June 14th, 2021. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Brummel,
Here.
Alderman Anderson,
Here.
Alderman Ashauer,
Here.
Alderman Berry,
Here.
Alderman Davalos,
Here.
Alderman Goodman,
Here.
Alderman Krischel,
Here.
Alderman Widener,
Here.
Alderman Wilson.
Here.
Thank you. Have a quorum. City staff, City Administrator Coakley,
Here.
Assistant City Administrator White,
Here.
Public Works Director Kukla,
Here.
Finance Director Dahlstrand,
Here.
Police Chief Toronto,
Here.
Management Analyst Kristen Youngmeyer,
Here.
Deputy Clerk Gravetti, Clerk Clark.
Here. Here.
Is there any other staff that I've missed? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. For those that are here, if they would please stand, and anyone else, if you would please say it silently at home to yourselves. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now we're on to citizens' comments. We will begin with those present at City Hall wishing to make comment. We have 3 people this evening. First, we have Connie Schmidt. Connie, if you'd please go to the microphone and make sure you give us your name and address.
I was wondering how they would do this with the citizens. Connie Schmidt, 3 South 501 Landon Drive in Warrenville. I am a clean energy advocate. I understand that you are considering 2 companies for energy aggregation. I'm going to butcher the name of the first one. Allego. Thank you. Allego and C-Square. Quick internet search.
Sorry, Alderman Berry, is the microphone on? We can't hear very well.
No, it is not green.
Okay, sorry.
Do I push the button? Yes.
Yeah.
How nice that one of you noticed.
Okay. Okay, Connie, you want to start again?
Yeah.
You don't have to do the name and address, though.
Okay. I'm a clean energy advocate. I understand that you are considering 2 companies for aggregation. Yeah. Allego? I don't know why. And MC Squared. A quick internet search told me that Allego was accused of defrauding community residents by overcharging. 2 other companies were named in that suit as well for over $3 million. That on its own would make me leery of that company, and I understand you've been informed of this as well. The other company that you're considering was signed by Evanston, and environmental advocates that I know in that community did come out in favor of this move at the time. But let me just caution you. Springfield is being called into a special session this summer to consider the governor's clean energy plan. It is based in great part on the Clean Energy Jobs Act that Sierra Club and other environmental groups have been working to pass for over 2 years. The Senate is back in session tomorrow and the House on Wednesday to talk about this important bill. It might be prudent to take a pause and see if that bill passes and what difference that can make for the city. At the very most, a 1-year contract would be the best thing that I would consider, considering all the changing things that are going on with clean energy. Another thing to keep in mind is that CUB, the Citizens Utility Board, which is the biggest supporter of citizen rights when it comes to utilities, generally has suggested staying with ComEd because In doing so, you support clean energy here in Illinois. There is a renewable energy tax on our bill every month. All citizens who pay ComEd bills pay for renewable energy. That money goes to fund projects here in Illinois and determined by the Illinois Power Authority, the IPA. In addition, I will just add, since I'm here and I probably have 30 more seconds, there are many ways that the city could be more progressive with clean energy. Installing solar on city wells has been suggested for over 5 years. There were grants available through FEJA, the law that the Clean Energy Law passed in 2016, for municipal buildings, which Warrenville could have taken advantage of. So if you really want to do something, please don't just stop at aggregation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Larry Berger?
Hi, Larry Berger, 28 West 711 Wagner Court. I'm here for the gaming program. I just wanted to say that it's something that I'm here on behalf of the VFW, and I'm the commander of the VFW right now. I'd just like to say that, you know, the gaming is very important to us. None of us are getting any younger. We're all in our 70s and up, and it's getting harder and harder for us to do these big programs to try and raise a few dollars. And things are just getting tight, and COVID really put a hurt on us. So having the gaming machines would really help us out a lot and get us through a few more years. We're Vietnam veterans. We're starting to lose them, quite a few. I think we've lost 4 members already this year. So that's all. I just wanted to put a plug in for it, and thank you.
Thank you. Patrick O'Connor.
Pat, my last name is O'Connor, 3H5701 Avenue, down the way. Last Thursday, I went downstairs to talk to the woman about I work at Topgolf, and I take the base bus, and all the time now it can't find my house. It had to turn on 1 Avenue and 1 and say my house right here. I'm like, no, keep on going. And the past Monday, same thing. The people can't find my house, and I actually had to show people how to get there. And I don't know what you can do about that, but it's very, very frustrating is when I go to tell people where I live at. Right? I understand 3S is 3S 5701 Avenue. It's not like 35570. No, it's 3S 570. Thank you. Love you.
Thank you. Okay, we have no one else present for comment. We will now hear any verbal comments from the public participating by phone. Anyone from the public wishing to speak, please announce yourself with your name and address. Please speak slowly and clearly so we can capture your information. Once we have everyone wishing to speak, I will call on you one by one to proceed with your comments. Is there anyone who is on a call right now that wishes to speak? Okay, hearing no one, we will go on to email comments. The city has received one email comment, which I will read. I am writing to comment on the city's pending action on the municipal electric service aggregation program. You are probably aware of possible action in the State General Assembly to pass the Clean Energy Jobs Act. It was close to passing a week or so ago when pressure was applied on behalf of the Prairie State Energy Campus, one of the largest polluters in the nation. The PSEC coal plant is partially owned by Naperville and some other west suburban towns that signed a long-term contract for coal-produced electric power. The agreement was signed and the plant built in 2007 or 2008, I believe. This was supposed to be a great deal for cheap power. Now they owe bond payments on the plant, are stuck in a long-term contract to purchase dirty power, and it is becoming clear that coal power is not a good idea. CEJA is discussed on these pages of the Citizens Utility Board website. It would be advisable to be familiar with the provisions of this bill, especially if the contract you are considering is long-term. So go to www.citizensutility.org/clean-energy-jobs-act. There are currently several bills in both the Senate and House of U.S. Congress to price carbon, in other words, to place a rising tax on fossil fuel companies, including natural gas, to penalize them for the damage they do not currently pay for. Fossil fuels have an unfair advantage in the marketplace because they pollute and are warming the climate for free. The result will be rising fossil fuel energy costs. Pricing carbon will send a message to the market that investing in or looking for some access to clean renewable energy will be necessary. A realistic carbon price will rapidly reduce emissions, foster clean, affordable energy to replace it, incentivize technical innovation, and save millions of lives and medical costs as pollution is reduced. If the carbon tax is paired with a provision to use much of the proceeds to pay American households, family budgets will be protected and the policy will be durable enough to do the job. Currently, the U.S. is one of only 2 nations with developed economies that do not have a carbon tax. So the likelihood of this effective policy passing is increased. The policy is popular in public surveys. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce has supported a carbon price, and so has the Business Roundtable, an organization of major U.S. corporations. It is deemed to be good for the economy, local and national, and good for jobs. In my opinion, this contract seems like a large step back, out of sync with climate action the public considers important, and a bad deal for residents who may see their energy costs rise. I was pleased when Warrenville entered a contract for 100% renewable energy a few years ago, despite the fact that the supplier was not developing clean renewable energy in Illinois and instead purchased RECs. I would be disheartened if the city reduces the renewable component to only 5% from 100% renewable in a new aggregation agreement that still does not provide for creation of additional renewable energy sources. We would be moving in entirely the wrong direction. With respect, Laura Howell, 30304 Fowler Circle, Warrenville, Illinois. Thank you. My pages. Okay, when we are now concluded with citizens' comments, there will be no other opportunity for the public to comment after this. Okay, the official and staff comments. Mayor Brummel.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a reminder that we made the right decision. I should say the 4th of July committee made the right decision to go forward with the fireworks this year. It looks like it's going to be a good time. Reminder that on July 3rd, Warrenville will have fireworks this year. We still are not, they weren't confident enough at the decision-making time to have the celebration that we normally have in Cerny Park. But we're still going to have a celebration with the fireworks. So be ready and find yourself a safe spot to watch them and enjoy.
Thank you. Clerk? Okay, Clerk Clark?
I have nothing.
Okay, thank you. We have no treasurer. Okay, the alderman, I will call on you one at a time. Alderman Anderson.
No comments tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Ashour.
No comments, thanks.
Thank you. I have no comments at this time. Alderman Davalos.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Excuse me. Alderman Goodman.
Yes, we had another meeting of the Fermilab Community Advisory Board recently. I wanted to report back to the council that they are still not going to be open to the public in the foreseeable future, but they said that they will keep us updated about whether bicyclists and pedestrians will be let back on site. If and when they do so, there's going to be a lot more ID requirements, and it's not quite clear which parts of the site will be open to the public in the future, so that's a shame. I was talking about it with Alderman Davalos, and I just realized I hadn't mentioned that to the City Council, so just wanted to make sure you were updated. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Kerschel.
I have nothing tonight, thank you.
Alderman Widener.
I have nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you. City Administrator Coakley.
Just real briefly, it is really nice to see we have, I think, if I count right, 6 people in person in the meeting room. And it's nice to see things opening up again around the whole area, and including even our city hall for people who are vaccinated. So just a comment on the evolving openness and getting back to the new normal. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on to the business of the meeting. We have many things on the agenda tonight. So first, we're going to do the consideration of an electric aggregation program, which would be effective October of 2021. Assistant City Administrator Christina White, please.
Thank you. So if this topic was not complicated enough, there were some changes in the last week that completely changed my recommendation. So hopefully you've had a chance to review the memo I sent earlier today. If not, that's okay. I'm going to try to walk through it in this presentation this evening in as simple a format as I possibly can. We do have a representative of the city's consultant, NIMEC, here with us tonight as well, Sharon Durling. So I will be relying on Sharon to help fill in some of the gaps. But first things first is talking about the differences with the current electric aggregation program, which is the fixed rate program, versus what is being proposed as the new alternative program. So if I can get my slides to go forward, there we go. So the current program, as I said, is a fixed rate program. What that means is the rate is locked in for the period or the term of the agreement. Our current supplier is Eligo Energy. That program expires October of 21, so later this year. Current supply rate is 7.515 cents per kilowatt hour. The current ComEd rate as of June 2021 is 7.127, and we have 100% green energy through the renewable energy certificates. The new recommended program, again referring to it as the alternative program or ComEd rate match program, works a little bit differently. So under the alternative program, the supplier can choose which accounts they move and take over and which accounts continue to be supplied by ComEd. So in this little bit of a graphic here, we have an example. If the ComEd rate was 7.8 cents per kilowatt hour and the actual cost to service those accounts or supply those accounts varies between 7.4 to 8.3 cents, The supplier would take these accounts that are less expensive to supply, and they would leave the more expensive accounts circled in red up here with ComEd. But from a consumer standpoint, everybody pays the same rate. So there is no rate difference depending on which supplier you're in, which is different from the current program. To provide a little bit of a comparison between the two side by side, the fixed rate program or the traditional program, again, fixed supply rate, 100% renewable energy option through the purchase of renewable energy certificates. Since 2016, with our experience with the program, the ComEd rate has been slightly more competitive, but all service is still handled through ComEd regardless of who the supply is with, and residents can opt out at any time for any reason. Under the new alternative program, the supply rate would vary because it would match the ComEd rate. We would still have the option for 100% renewable energy certificates. Again, rate matches with ComEd. All service continues to be handled by ComEd. So if a resident has an issue, a concern, a question, billing, all of that is still handled through ComEd. They can still opt out at any time for any reason. And there is an option for a civic contribution, which I'll explain here in the next slide. So the green energy, the renewable energy certificates or green energy, the supplier can provide those renewable energy certificates at various percentages depending on which program the city were to choose. And they can provide that and civic contributions or civic contributions depending on the program selection. As a community that uses the renewable energy certificates, we would be entitled to the EPA Green Power Partner Community as long as 5% of those renewable energy certificates are purchased through an EPA approved supplier. The civic contributions are essentially dollars that would come back to the city from the supplier. There's no limitations on how those civic contributions can be used, and the city council can direct funds for local green initiatives using those civic contributions. One thing I want to emphasize is that there is no change in the rate to the consumer whether or not the city takes civic contributions. So there is no extra cost to the end consumer if the city chooses to take a program that has civic contributions, and there's no cost savings to the end consumer if the city chooses not to take civic contributions. That is just part of what the program entails. It doesn't change the rate to the consumer. So one thing you'll note of this is slightly different from what's in your packet and what's in the memo. There's a couple different options because in the last week there have been some significant changes in the industry of electric supply. It completely changed our recommendation and what the suppliers were offering. As I noted in the summary, pricing with electric aggregation fluctuates daily. So we only receive indicative pricing, which means that the suppliers can change what they're proposing. And in fact, we will get another round of indicative pricing before the June 21st City Council meeting, but hopefully there won't be any new surprises between now and then. So this slide summarizes what staff is recommending, which is now option 2 in blue. We are recommending Eligo Energy for a 1-year term under the new alternative program. It's a supply rate match with ComEd at 100% green renewable energy certificates, and the civic contribution amount is $24,155, and that is a one-time civic contribution because it's only a 1-year term. The other 2 options are there as alternatives. If the City Council would like to discuss those in more detail, we can. Option 3 is a different supplier, still the 1-year term, but with 0 contributions and only a 5% green energy renewable energy certificate purchase. That is, again, the minimum EPA required. And then the last option in the chart is there, again, to compare is the fixed rate option. Of the list of options provided through NIMEC, the Dynegy option for 3 years shows the lowest supply rate at 6.915. The current ComEd rate, again, is 7.127. So you might be wondering, why are we not recommending the lower supply rate, since there would be a cost savings from the current ComEd rate. And the reason for that is that with this change that occurred in the last week, it is very, very likely that the ComEd rate is going to drop again and drop significantly over the course of that 3-year term, meaning that it will likely not be competitive much past this year. And with that fixed rate option, there is no civic contribution, as is the historical traditional version of the plan. So with what I just covered, I'm sure there's likely to be some questions. It's a lot of information. I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, very good. I will go through the list, and if you have any questions, go right ahead, comments. We'll start with Alderman Anderson.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. 2 questions. This is an area that I'm not very well versed, so I'm kind of learning as we go. But number one, just given what the first public speaker mentioned, I'm just curious why ComEd is not on the differential as an option. Is it because you can always opt out and choose ComEd if you want? So this is just giving folks actually 2 options, or is that just not something that we recommend? And then the second question is, one of the other speakers seemed to be concerned about LGO as a company. Do we have documented due diligence that gives us more confidence in this company?
Okay, so we typically don't recommend ComEd as an option because ComEd is always an option at any time in the program, regardless of which option the city chooses or which program the city chooses. Individual residents do get a notice letting them know that they can opt out both at the beginning of the program and at any time throughout the program. So that anybody can always refer back to ComEd. To answer the second question, I'm actually going to ask Sharon to jump in here because I am aware that there was something going on with Eligo. I believe they settled that claim and there's more to it, and I think she can offer more specifics.
Yes, thank you even for asking that question because customer service, I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask Christina, maybe if you could stop sharing at this point, just so we can see the pictures.
Oh, absolutely.
Ready? Shall I go ahead?
Yes.
So yeah, customer service is super important to us. It's number one. And Eligo wanted to do business with NYMEC for some time because we're the leader in consulting and electric aggregation in Northern Illinois. We met with and addressed this specific issue. What happened was, because we're not comfortable recommending a company that isn't up to par, and I mean, top quality standards. So this was very concerning. What happened was in 2016, Eligo had hired a third-party vendor to make solicitation calls. They never did door-to-door, but they were outgoing calls. They discovered in 2016 there were some, I'll call it nefarious calls. Promises made and salespeople were not making accurate statements and in fact saying people would be paying less than they actually ended up paying. Eligo stated that they voluntarily halted that telemarketing and they have to self-report to the Illinois Commerce Commission. So they weren't sued by the Attorney General, but they entered. There's a press release that talks about, it was in Crane's Chicago Business a few years ago, talking about them and 2 other companies that were sued. So they entered into an agreement, voluntary compliance. And in fact, we later learned that the third-party vendor paid the fines that they had to pay for undertaking such, I'll call it nefarious, inappropriate activity. So that doesn't pass any kind of test with us. We waited a few years, continued to talk with them, and we saw their customer service rating ranking by the ICC, and the ICC ranks all suppliers relative to the number of complaints they received. It moved from 2 to 3 to 4 stars, so it's a really good, strong trend. We began doing business with them and since have probably done 50 or 70 electric aggregation programs with them and have worked hard with them to make sure they offer stellar service. So yeah, we've accepted them on our bid list. Happy to respond to any more questions about that concerning issue.
Okay, no further questions from me.
Thank you. Alderman Ashour?
I just appreciate all the effort that Christine always puts into this. I agree with your recommendation. It's a 1 year, and it's the same rate as ComEd. So and the city gets some benefit that we can use for some projects that we may need to have the money for. So I agree with your recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. I also found this to be very easy to understand when Christina presented it, because as I read it, it was very confusing. So I appreciate all that she's done. And I also do agree with the 1 year. We might as well see what happens with this. I don't want to get into anything long term, since you think that the rates will be changing so much. So I think that's a good idea. Okay, Alderman Davalos.
Thank you. Yeah, my like sort of question is, one of the public speakers tonight talked about what's going on in the state legislature this summer regarding this topic. And I just wondered if maybe anybody on staff had any idea how that could affect what we're doing. I know this is only a 1 year contract, so we could always jump on board with what's going on next year, but I will tell you that I'm not quite familiar with what the specifics of what they're looking at, and I just wondered if anybody else on staff had any insight into that. Thank you.
So like any legislation, we do continue to monitor what happens there. As far as projecting how that's going to change the electric aggregation, I think it's too early to tell at this point, because like anything, it can change many times over before anything is actually adopted or finalized. Sharon, do you have any insight? Have you guys been monitoring?
Well, I do have one comment. The speaker referenced the tax for renewable energy certificates, or RECs, in Illinois. That is on your ComEd bill, but that's been baked into a different portion that's not supply. That's under the second portion on your bill that's called delivery. And so that's now a part of the ComEd delivery charge. So as that may increase, and believe me, RECs, renewable energy certificates, are very expensive. So I think you're getting a great offer from Alligo, but as they increase, you're going to see a little bit of uptick in that delivery charge, which is separate from aggregation, separate from supply, and a separate portion of your bill.
Thank you, Sharon. And I believe that the current ComEd required green energy portion is 19%. That's correct. I see you nodding yes. So it's 19% green energy.
Alderman Davalos?
No, that's fine. Thank you. That is helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Goodman.
Yes. My first question is, why are we being asked to direct staff to put together recommendations? Why aren't we asking the EAC to be involved in these discussions? I mean, we have an environmental advisory commission to give us environmental advice. This seems like the perfect time to make use of their expertise and efforts.
Well, I will say that there is a little bit of a time constraint with this. There's about a 90-day window between the decision from the council and the implementation of whatever program is chosen, because of opt-out notices and some things that have to happen between now and October to make the program go forward. Certainly in the future, this is something that could be referred to the EAC for additional input and consideration. It has always been a staff recommendation item, which is why it is recommended by staff currently, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case in the future.
I'm talking about the second half of the motion, where it says direct staff to develop recommendations for the use of civic contributions for local community environmental programs, projects, and initiatives.
Thank you for that clarification. That is one option. So that is a piece to this, that if we end up with a program with a civic contribution, we are not ready to make any decisions or recommendations tonight. We would come back to the council at a future committee meeting and talk about all the ways that we could review possible programs or things that are either currently already in place or future programs. And working with the EAC is certainly one option to consider in terms of coming up with ways to use that civic contribution on a green initiative or program.
Yes, I mean, I agree with your first statement that, certainly going forward, it would be helpful to have the EAC's input maybe a year from now on, whether it makes more sense to buy the RECs or to do a green program with a civic contribution that's available. If we're weighing those two things against one another, given the change between this morning and the staff recommendation that we have in front of us now, it doesn't sound like we need to discuss those trade-offs as much. So unless there's some dramatic changes based on state legislation between this week and next, which dramatically impact our prices, I know that they change daily. I know that there's some chance that this whole recommendation will look different next week. But I would just say that I would maybe change the motion slightly to say staff and the EAC, if possible, to put together recommendations for the use of the civic contribution for this year, and then hopefully make use of the EAC as a resource when we're considering this program again next year. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Alderman Kerschel?
Excuse me, I have no questions. I'm in support of the recommendation. I was actually a little relieved to see the memo this afternoon because I think that makes it much simpler decision, something that I would have maybe recommended anyways going forward. So I think the 1 year makes sense. So I support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Widener?
Thank you. The only thing I'm curious about is we talk about the renewable energy and the green energy, and I just wonder what the exact sources are of those classifications, rather than broadly saying green energy certificates. I guess if you could be more specific as to the percentages of solar, fracking, natural gas, that type of thing.
Sharon, do you want to chime in on that one?
Yes, I know that at least the first 5% would be wind renewable energy certificates located here in the Midwest. They're the most expensive, high quality, and what the EPA requires to receive your designation. Additionally, on your contract, it could be others such as hydro plants, and there's a new concept, heat recovery from manufacture, and that's very hyper local, actually within 50 miles of Chicago area. It might even be closer to you. That's a new source that's recognized by the EPA. And by the way, these RECs, they are the only currency of the green or renewable market. Even if you have your own solar panels on your roof, you're creating RECs that are marked with serial numbers, dates, etc. So probably heat recovery, wind, and possibly some hydro. It will be purchased in the future should you get the program. So after signing the contract, we would actually bring a report to you of specifically what they are, where they're located, the names, and the serial numbers.
Okay, thank you. I agree with involving the AAC. I just wanted to note that the CMRP is undergoing a search for funding for some of the projects that wear out and we need to provide funding for. If perhaps we could find ways to direct the civic contributions to projects supporting the CMRP that are green initiatives, I think that would be very beneficial in the long run as the city moves forward. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson? Alderman Wilson? Your microphone keeps going on and off. Okay.
Okay, can you hear
Okay.
me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
No comment.
Very good. Thank you. And Mayor Brummel, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Christina. This is such a quagmire to try to make sense out of, and I appreciate your efforts because they always do come up with a reasonable alternative. And I agree with your recommendation tonight. I'm delighted that it's a one-year contract, given the volatility of everything that's going on in this particular sector. It looks like the best choice. So I agree with your recommendation and support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any more questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, can we have a motion, please? Alderman Goodman?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the City Council, 1, enter into a one-year agreement with Alligo Energy, including 100% green energy renewable energy certificates, RECs, and $24,155 in civic contributions. And 2, direct staff in the EAC to develop recommendations for the use of the civic contributions on local community environmental programs, projects, and initiatives.
Alderman Davalos, second.
Okay, we have a motion by Alderman Goodman and a second by Alderman Davalos. All those in favor? Or should I go? Oh, I'm sorry. We have to do a roll call. I'm sorry. Clerk, could you please read the roll?
Yes. Alderman Goodman?
Aye.
Alderman Anderson?
Aye.
Alderman Widener?
Aye.
Alderman Wilson?
Aye.
Alderman Krischel?
Aye.
Alderman Berry?
Aye.
Alderman Ashour?
Aye.
Alderman Davalos?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. On to number 2, consideration to allow video gaming. City Administrator Coakley, please.
Thank you. I will start out and then I'm going to turn it over to Kristen Youngmeyer, who has prepared all the detailed research in your packet. As you'll recall, at the last Public Works and Infrastructure Committee, the whole meeting in April. It's been a long year. We discussed this topic and committee directed staff to prepare more information, which we have done, along with working with the city attorney. So there's quite a bit of information that is in your packet. Ultimately, tonight we want to know, is the council still interested in pursuing video gaming? And then if there's some specifics, our recommendation ultimately is to use the liquor license provisions in the city code to put some local restrictions. So there's a limited number. You could control how many places could have video gaming. You could also put some restrictions, for example, such as they must serve food, or it could be a veterans organization or something along those lines. One of the concerns is with the video cafes, where locations will simply open in a vacant storefront and basically have something like serve beer and could serve something as simple as nacho chips and just have video gaming machines in multiple locations. Hypothetical example, but those are around the area. The primary reason, backing up a step further from the previous meeting, was that as Alderman Widener just mentioned, the capital maintenance and replacement plan and the fund is in need of new revenue. It not only because COVID has taken away a lot of the revenue, at least for the bad year that we had with the economic impacts, but also just the growing infrastructure the city has and the increasing costs. There is a large gap that Alderman Widener and Alderman Krischel are working with staff. We're trying to figure out how to fill that going forward. We'll be making additional recommendations, but this is one idea that would help provide some of the revenue to fill that gap. And it's in the multiple hundreds of thousands. We'll get to that in a future meeting, but this would at least be a partial help and would not cost residents additional our businesses additional money. It would provide support for some businesses that had it, and it would also, it's a choice. Basically, it's not something we all have to pay because we live here. It's an option. With that lengthy short introduction, I will turn it over to Kristen to review the research and information that's in your packet, and then I'll talk a little bit after she's done about what our city attorney has recommended.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And good evening. Let's see. It's going. All right. Can everybody see the PowerPoint? Yes. Okay. So
secondary screen, Kristen.
Hmm?
We're seeing your secondary screen.
Oh. How do I
Go to display settings up at the top and to the left.
Okay. Oh.
There you go. Wow.
Okay.
Awesome.
There we go. Thank you. So I did 2 surveys. One, I surveyed local businesses just to gauge who would be interested in Warrenville. And then from that, project an estimate of how much revenues our city could potentially get. I also surveyed some communities in DuPage County or near DuPage County that currently allow video gaming, just to get a sense of when they were going through this decision, what concerns their stakeholders had, and then just also get a better sense of their current experience since allowing video gaming. So with the business survey, 6 of the 24 eligible businesses said they would seek a license if it were offered tomorrow. For the businesses that are interested, they can have up to 6 terminals, and assuming there are not any limitations or restrictions for the number they could have, this would result in 21 to 28 terminals being installed among the 6 businesses. There's a map kind of showing where they are located within the city. And then using 2019 revenue data of DuPage County communities that allow this, I am giving a conservative estimate of that the city would make between $41,900 to $61,600 annual revenue if this were allowed. For respondents who wanted VGTs or video gaming terminals, they said this would be extra income that would really help their business and potentially help bring in new customers that like this type of amenity. For respondents that did not want to put in video game terminals, they did not have any concerns with other businesses having it. There's a variety of reasons why they didn't want it, but again, they didn't necessarily have any concerns if it were allowed. So for the survey to DuPage communities that do allow video gaming, some concerns from residents expressed were around the impact on the community, such as image, morality. For city officials, their concerns were related to being able to control video gaming, such as ensuring compliance, the number that are within their community. They didn't just want it to kind of be out of control. There wasn't a lot of concerns from staff, but if any, there were concerns on how much time this would add to their current workloads. And then kind of similar to what we've been hearing from businesses who want it in Warrenville, other community businesses also expressed just concern in being able to stay competitive. Yes. So since being implemented, communities that allow it have identified the revenue to their municipality as a huge benefit, as well as this amenity being able to support their businesses. Some challenges kind of relate to just being able to control VGTs if restrictions are implemented by the city. One kind of occurring comment was around wanting to limit or avoid video cafes or parlors from being established. So restrictions would be put up, but businesses still try to kind of, you know, meet the requirements and still be able to have a cafe. Let's see. But as you guys, as council makes this decision, there are some, if you guys were to allow, decide to allow, there are some local, or there's some restrictions to consider that will help strengthen local control. Many communities suggested and exercise tying the video game licensing to their liquor code. They also put in restrictions such as capping the number of licenses they give out or requiring food service. A few communities implement a waiting period where businesses have to be established for a year before they can apply for a video game license. Let's see. And so with that, those are just kind of big highlights of what I learned from the surveys. And we'll be open to any questions you may have and as you consider this amenity.
Thank you. Okay, I will go through the list again. Oh,
jump back in.
Okay.
Sorry.
Administrator Coakley,
Not
go right
quite
ahead.
so quick, sorry. I just wanted to go over some of the things and follow up on Kristen's information. And thank you again, Kristen. That was very well put together and delineated and took all the research and put it into nice tables to easily to follow. The city attorney in the back of that information is two memos from the city attorney, one dated April 28th, which goes over a broader array of controls that the local home rule community, which Warrenville is, could implement. Sometime after it was last discussed, I think it was in 2013 as I recall, the last time it was discussed in Warrenville. A few years later, one of the inner suburban communities was sued and challenged over the right to have local controls, and they prevailed in court. And the response from the judicial system was home rule communities absolutely have the right to put in their own local controls. So that is the premise that we are looking under. Brooke, our city attorney, does discuss those various types of measures that you could use, including the zoning code, where special use and public hearings would be required, or simply license, or in addition, license each of the terminals and provide a separate license that the city would regulate, and so on, as she's delineated. As we discussed it with staff, and then I had several different follow-up meetings virtually with city attorney, we focused in on what came from also the research in other communities, is looking at the liquor code. The number one concern the city staff has is that whatever we do be simplified and easier to administer. The feedback on using the zoning code was that really is a very administratively burdensome process, and we were not clear on staff that there's really a benefit to that to be had. You could certainly add different restrictions and there'd be fees to be paid. It would be a lengthy process, and it would include public hearings, take up time for planning commission and staff to review. Ultimately, and we also, even with a more limited scope, set aside having separate licensing that the city would have for each, for example, a sticker or something that would be for each of the video gaming terminals. Those both seemed excessive in terms of administrative burdens, and for both the business that's applying and for the staff. We would not want to create something that, especially if it's going to be only around $60,000 revenue, that would have to add another staff person to try to administer such a program, or even a half-time person. So we focused on the liquor licensing. That's why the June 7th memo from the city attorney really focuses on that aspect and goes through the different ways that a class, we're calling it Class V, that seems to be more common with the other communities that have created a liquor licensing category. As you recall, there's a number of different classifications that we have, from selling packaged liquor to manufacturing beer, such as two of our businesses, Two Brothers and Rock Bottom, do, to what I call generally the pouring licenses. If you go to a restaurant and they have a beer and wine license, or a full liquor license where they can serve, as would be in a bar or a restaurant that has such a license. And those are the ones that are eligible. The ones with the pouring license are the ones that are eligible, and as Kristen has shown on her work that were surveyed. There's 24 that are eligible in the community. Many are not even interested in doing this, but some certainly are. The recommendation from our counterparts and in following our thinking from our own liquor license code is to have it as limited licensing, just as you do with the number of package sales and pouring licenses and all. The council then has a complete discretion to make decisions each time whether they want to create a new license, and then when someone goes out of business or leaves or closes or changes hands, you have the right to remove that license, so you can keep some control on that. Within the code, once we find out a little bit more about what your intentions are or interests are tonight, we will work with the city attorney, assuming that there's interest in pursuing video gaming here, and draft an ordinance that have more of those specifics and bring it back, I would suggest, to the next committee, the whole meeting, and then discuss it more there, make sure you're comfortable with it, and then we could forward it. The committee could forward it to a council meeting if you're ready to do that. So I'd be happy to answer questions, and I know Kristen would as well on any of these items.
Okay, now we will go through the list. Alderman Anderson.
My comments, one, I just want to commend staff, Kristen, John, just did I think this is a great set of documents and very, very helpful and great insights. I'm supportive, though I'm interested in the rest of the conversation. I'm currently supportive of the recommendation. I like using the Class B liquor license. That made sense to me. I have just some peers that are in Woodridge, and I asked them about this, and the comment that I heard back was, you know what, we don't mind it, except, you know, when you go out to breakfast with your family and then you look over and there's this plexiglassed off area in the restaurant, which has video gaming in it too. And so that didn't feel right for us, but the way we're looking to approach this and the folks that have signed up for it feel like they make a whole lot of sense, and I could be supportive. So no questions at this time.
Thank you. Alderman Ashour.
I just want to say thank you for the great report. And this was, the research was excellent. It certainly points out that there are more pluses than minuses. I do support the liquor license option, probably with some type of licensing for the machines that requires probably an annual inspection. I don't know that twice a year would matter so much, but it seems like there's some additional revenue that can be raised that way. I'd be interested in the discussion regarding how the people that supply the machine are pay their share, rather than the entire burden being on the business owner. I like the recommendation. I think it's a good thing. I think that it's a good, especially with the fact that I think we'll have more people come on board. I think that your estimates are, as you said, conservative. I think it'll be a big help to the budget.
Thank you. I also agree. I was never ever opposed to this item. So going forward, for me, with the Class B liquor license portion of it, sounds very reasonable, especially since we have restrictions for those licenses. If they can pass that license, they should be able to pass for the a gaming license also then. I think the businesses that have signed up, these are all local businesses that most of them are not corporate businesses. A lot of them are not interested in doing this type of thing. I think this will help the smaller local businesses and also places like the VFW. So I'm in favor of this. Thank you. To me. And now to Alderman Davalos.
Yeah, thank you. I'm having trouble seeing everybody with the screen up there, but when this came up before, I was a no vote on this. And so things have changed. I certainly have become even more supportive than I was about helping businesses, small businesses too. These are such difficult times. And yet, as I think back to those times, I got more phone calls and emails and letters thanking me for that no vote than I have on any other issue I've ever voted for. So that's going through my mind as I'm trying to discern this. And I don't know how to really, I'm not sure it's any way to get that residential information necessarily. I think that even though I think maybe the estimates are at the low end, if you look at the range, they were estimating the low end. It's not actually a tremendous amount of money at that point. So that is what I'm looking as a trade-off. Although it's not just the city's income on this, but businesses all to be considered. And as I look at that relatively small amount, I just wonder about the staff time, balancing that off. As Kristen went through her slides there, and you looked at the challenges that some of the other communities were having, there was a lot of administrative time that was going in to not only getting this up and licensing people, but just compliance and enforcement and figuring that all out. And John kind of alluded a little bit to that, although maybe a license on the machines could offset some of that, perhaps. So I'm not sure really where I am, but those are the things I'm sort of thinking about and weighing. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman.
I would echo some of what Alderman Davalos said. The last time we considered this item, I voted against video gambling in Warrenville because it didn't seem like a Warrenville kind of thing, and the people I've spoken to in the intervening years have agreed that this was not a Warrenville kind of thing, and they didn't want it in their community. Assuming that the council changes its mind and moves forward with this, though, I do have some thoughts on the research that's been done by staff. The city administrator's June 10th memo ends with a recommendation about limiting the number of Class V liquor licenses to 10 or less, and I wonder if the city administrator could explain that to me, given the fact that only 6 businesses have even expressed interest, and we have a policy of erasing unused liquor licenses to maintain local control.
Oh, Administrator Coakley.
Sorry, waiting for the chair. It's by way of really an example. You could certainly limit it to 6. That's a council's prerogative. 10 is as simply a number to set for the maximum. There were a couple of other businesses that did say they might be interested in it if it was allowed at some point. They weren't sure at this point. I would concur with, I think you're thinking on this. It's always better to limit it more and have more restrictions going in, be more conservative going in. It's harder to rein something back in once it's gotten started than it is to loosen it up and allow more. So there's nothing magical about the 10. It could be simply 6, it could be 5, whatever number you're comfortable with. I thought it was good to have a number in there to give a starting point.
Okay. Looking through some of the other communities' experience, I certainly hope that if we did allow a Class V liquor license, that it would require food service. And I think the 1-year waiting period that Westmont put into place seems like a minimum to me. You know, we don't want trashy slot machine establishments opening up in Warrenville that do nothing but this. I think even the people in this call who are in favor of video gaming wanted to support existing businesses and not to, you know, open gambling parlors here in Warrenville. I think existing businesses, none of the 6 businesses that have expressed interest are brand new. El Toro Negro opened last year during the pandemic, but I believe it's been about a year now. So if we did establish a 1-year waiting period, I suppose that would still allow all of these 6 businesses to begin immediately if they wished. But going forward, then if new applicants came into the community, it would help us demonstrate that they could exist as a restaurant or as a food service establishment before having a Class V liquor license if we did do that. And I think that that fits what we're trying to do here better than not having that requirement. My last comment would be about fees. I believe, based on my interpretation of the material that's been put forward, the estimate of revenue, which staff has put in their summary, is $47,900 to $61,600 annual revenue to Warrenville, and that does not include any liquor licensing fee revenue. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So the fee revenue for the liquor licensing, I was looking at the Bartlett memo where their assistant village administrator was recommending an increase in fee of $1,000. They had only charged $250 per machine initially. And they wanted that to be split $750 between the terminal operator and the establishment. Can a fee split like that be done on a liquor license or only on a municipal fee if it's part of some sort of zoning requirement, which isn't your recommendation? Do you know?
Administrator Coakley.
I will venture, obviously we need to talk to the attorney, but this would be under, similar to what Alderman Ashour was talking about, where we would license the city without zoning included or involved. We could create a licensing for the video game terminals. So each terminal, there might be $1,000 fee charged with that. They'd have to get some kind of license per, maybe a sticker for each one or something from the city. They already have to get one from the state. And that would not be under the liquor licensing. I don't believe that we have a ability to charge a liquor license fee to the business. That's the business owner. I don't think that could be split with the charge back to the vendor. So this would be the licensing fee for the terminals that town was likely splitting between the business owner and the video gaming terminal company.
Right. I mean, this is in, I think it's a May 11th memo for the Village of Bartlett in the backup materials. And they talk about how it just says the Village of Bartlett has the authority to mandate that the terminal operator be responsible for paying a portion of the terminal fee. And I just wondered if that was something that we would have the ability to do for a liquor license. And it sounds like from what you're saying, no, but maybe we could check on that.
I will check. I believe that would be the liquor license would be the business owner. The terminal license would be to the video terminal operator that supplies those machines. That's a separate licensing under the state laws, and each business that gets the machines has to get them through one of the authorized vendors, license operators in the state. You may remember in 2013, a gentleman who represented one of those companies came and made that presentation on behalf of some of our businesses that have requested it. He represented one of those companies that would then pay that. We would issue our own license to them. I will confirm that with the attorney for the next meeting, but I'm certain we would have to handle it that way. But that would be an extra licensing, which you all can direct us to investigate in addition to like the Class V liquor code change, if you wish.
Well, $47,900 isn't a great deal of money. We could add to the revenue from doing this if we added a liquor license fee that was significant, but it would be easier on our small businesses if that could be directed to the terminal operator, who I believe gets 65% of the total revenue, and the municipality receives only 5%. So directing the fee towards them seems more fair to me, and it wouldn't be as burdensome on our Warrenville businesses if we could do it that way. So if we can structure it in that way, that would seem preferable to me. If we can't structure it in that way, then maybe having a very large fee would depend a lot upon what kind of agreement the local businesses have with those terminal operators and how much revenue they're getting. It says that it's split between the terminal operator and the establishment, but it doesn't say how, so they may have different contracts depending upon what kind of deal they get with the terminal operators. So without knowing more about that, it's hard to see whether or not that's a good place to look to for additional revenue or not. if we're going to go forward with this, I hope we do so in the most responsible way. And I'm still not going to support this today. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Alderman Kerschel?
Thank you. I do have one question. I have a couple comments. So first, the question is, we had talked about the staff time to kind of, I guess, regulate this, and I'm confused. Or I guess my question is, I thought most of the licensing, registration, regulation is kind of all handled by the state. So what would it be the staff's responsibility when it comes to this? Do you guys know yet, or do we have an estimate of that?
Administrator Coakley?
Until we know more about what the council wants to do specifically, it would be difficult to estimate. But if you have no restrictions at all and just simply change the code to allow video gaming, then it would only be regulated by the state. You wouldn't have to create a special liquor license code. There'd be no special class. There'd be no licensing. So there'd be no inspections required. There'd be no administrative anything except 6 places would get video gaming terminals and the state would remit money to us. And then there'd probably be some others that would open. The state would remit the share that the city gets on a regular basis. So that would be absolutely zero additional administrative burden. However, on the based on the liquor license recommendation, that would require some additional review. But since these folks would already have a liquor license, there should not be additional background checks or anything else that they currently go through for their annual license or their new license or their renewals and applying and processing those fees. It would simply be an overlay classification as I see it. Our finance director is at the meeting tonight very specifically for this purpose. If there's something, Kevin, that you want to add to what you see as that for the liquor license code and what additional burden there might be. And then I'll get back to licensing and the terminals.
No, if it's simply done as an overlay to what we already do, there wouldn't be a whole lot of extra work involved. It would just be issuing another license at the same time we would be issuing the pouring license that we're doing already. So I don't see a lot of additional burden in that regard.
Okay. The one other point, though, if we have the city decides in addition or separate from liquor licensing that a video gaming terminal license is created as a separate licensing category for the city, that might require an annual inspection where we'd have a part-time, probably our building inspector or maybe the code inspector would go out to make sure, business check to make sure that they're had the proper licenses for the number of machines they had. For example, they might only have 3 licensed. We go in and find out they have 5 now and hadn't gotten the license for those, or perhaps they've gotten rid of a couple and they have less. That would take some time for inspections. It would be some additional processing for licenses. That is unlikely to be overly burdensome though either. The most burdensome would be to go through the zoning process on, again, both the business owners and for the city, because you've got to publish as a special use. It would be a public hearing and a lot of processing to review the actual plans and scheduling of meetings in the plan commission, which again, nobody's really pressing from the council, I don't hear, and the staff is not recommending. So that would be the most burdensome all the way down to simply with the liquor license control. But the least burdensome on staff is just do nothing except to vote to allow it and let the market run as it would.
Okay,
Madam Chairman, can I add a comment here? I want to remind you that a number of, in recent years, we did do away with vending licensing because we did not have the ability to go out and enforce the vending licenses being on specific machines. Now, there were considerably more of those in number than would be the case here. But I just did want to remind you that we did not have the ability to enforce those. And it might cause a little bit of a burden on staff to enforce the licensing on these machines as well. But again, there aren't as many of those, but I wanted you to remind you that is why we stopped doing vending machine, individual licenses on vending machines.
Thank you. Alderman Kerschel, continue.
Yes, thank you. So, yes, I am in favor of this, and there's a couple of reasons. One, it is revenue to the city, which I also think these numbers may be a little conservative, but even if they're not, When we look at the CMRP, which is where we would kind of target this, it may not seem like a lot in the big picture, but if you have 10 of these ideas that bring revenue in, you're closing that gap, right? And so that's one reason, and the other is because the support for the local businesses. The numbers that we're looking at here, 47 to 61,000, that's the 5% cut for the municipality. There is a 70% cut to the establishment that they split with the vendor. So however, my understanding is that is a contract that is drawn up between the two. But that's a substantial amount of money that can really help these small businesses, restaurants and bars that can afford to stay open. And so that's for those two reasons. I support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Widener.
Yes, thank you. I believe the Chief Toronto is on the phone this evening, and I just wondered if he would address any impact on crime that he foresees and any kind of enforcement obligations or any other opinions he could share with us regarding this new initiative.
Thank you, Alderman. In all of my conversations with my colleagues in the jurisdictions that have video gaming terminals, there has been no increase as far as calls for service at the establishments that have these incidents of criminal activity at these businesses that have the video gaming terminals. And that really it is a non-issue as far as they're concerned. Again, you're just having the terminals there. This is not whole-scale gambling where you're having table games and things like that. So I do not foresee it being an issue. As far as our enforcement activities, we don't have anything to do with the enforcement of the operation of the terminals. Any complaints about the accuracy of the payouts on the terminals as such, or the administration of the actual gaming activity would be done through the state of Illinois and not involve the police department in Warrenville.
Would the police department get engaged on like counting the number of machines at all that were legal, and if a business owner went over his allocation, would the police learn to recognize that and report it, or how would that go?
Again, in the conversations I've had with colleagues, any type of if you have a separate license and the person exceeds the business owner, it would be a zoning violation, but it would be handled through a zoning inspector administratively. I would assume through an adjudication hearing.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And I also want to thank staff for the thorough research on this topic, and also to Alderman Crucial for bringing it forward. I, again, am in relative favor of this as long as the list of potential restrictions and that are recommended by staff satisfy the council concerns. I think, and it's all done in good taste, I think we could move ahead with this and see the benefits to local businesses and also the impact that it could have on the CMRP. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson.
First of all, I'd like to thank staff for the tremendous amount of information that they provided us with throughout all the states, all the cities in their area, and the number of units they have, the incomes over starting at 2015 through 2019. And one of the things I did note there was when you look at the number of machines that started out in each of these sites over those 4 or 5 years, the numbers increased, not decreased. And there's only a few instances where those were closed or locked down. So I think the potential's there, but they were also limited. And we have the capability of limiting the numbers that we want and desire here in Warrenville. So I think we still can control the numbers and how they operate. So I just think it's a good idea. We should do it. I'm in favor of it as an opportunity for businesses, for the organizations, and for the income that we can hopefully receive from this. So thank you, staff, for all your efforts, and I look forward to working with the attorney to come up with the answers to these questions that have come up about the number of units, the number of places, and how we're going to establish them and inspect them. So I know we can do it, but thank you for all the effort, and I agree with this.
Thank you. Mayor Brummel.
Thank you. And I very much appreciate the thoughtful discussion tonight, the questions that have been asked, and the observations of what would be necessary for this to be successful. I'm confident that if we send this back to staff and the attorney, that we can come up with a program that would fit the community and would tighten the controls to the point that we were comfortable with it. If you remember when we discussed at another time the recreational cannabis issue and the potential for having that particular item in our community, I thought came up with a very tight, solid program to allow that to happen. That would allow us to access the benefits for that business being in town and minimize the negative impacts. And I'm confident again that this is another issue that our staff and the attorney will be able to come up with what's necessary to make sure that we have the controls necessary to make sure we have quality establishments, we don't have too many, and all those details can be worked out. So I'm certainly in favor of the recommendation tonight to have staff work on a program and bring it back at the July 26th Public Safety and Finance Committee meeting. Initially, when this proposal came up back in 2013, I voted no, I was against it. I am philosophically opposed to gambling, especially gambling mixed with liquor. That's a personal thing. I think there are benefits to the community here that outweigh that personal thought or preference. Again, as long as things are controlled well, there is a benefit to the community, and I don't think a huge detriment. So I would be interested to see the council to move ahead with this tonight and give it back to staff and bring it back and see what we might come up with to help our businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Administrator Coakley.
Thank you. I'm listening to all the input from the elected officials, and we'll need a motion in a moment. But if there is indeed interest in having a separate licensing, remember, this is just to have the attorney work with the staff to prepare additional draft ordinance and information for the, and thank you, Mayor, for clarifying the Public Safety and Finance Committee meeting at the end of July. But if there's interested in having a separate license, which could be a whole different fee and charge to the terminal operator, please include that in the motion to direct us to include that. My recommendation was to focus on, our recommendation was to focus on liquor licensing, but you could do both. And it would be important to hear that. If that's the will of the council, the committee tonight, then we'll work towards that end and have a dual procedure there.
Thank you. Is someone prepared to make a motion? Alderman Ashour?
I would just like to suggest that if we're going to do licensing, that we could do it with a placard that the city furnishes that identifies a license for each machine. So it's as simple as someone going in and counting machines and looking at the license on the wall. And the, I want it to be simple. I don't know if we should start out with a level of licensing fees that have been suggested in some of the backup, but I do support that. And the other issue that is important to me is signage. If there's some way we can limit the type of signage that keeps it from looking like a gambling problem. That's important. That image, that message that sends, I think that is something that we should address in a positive way also. And I'm happy to hear any opinions on that.
Anyone else, comments or questions? Alderman Kruszel?
Yeah, I just have a question about the terminal licensing and how we would word that. So are we asking staff to prepare a terminal licensing agreement? Is that what are we looking for fees?
Administrator Coakley?
What I would recommend, and remember, this is just giving us enough instructions to work with the attorney, and she will work with her folks and bring back the correct legal language. I'm suggesting, it sounds like you may want to add a licensing category for the terminals. Alderman Ashour did a good job of describing how that might work. But just if you want them to be a separate licensing in addition to the video gaming liquor license classification, that would be two different ways that it would be licensed. The establishment with the liquor license would provide one level of control. The licensing of the terminals would provide an additional level and would have an additional fee that could be charged to the terminal operator. So I would suggest you, if somebody wants to make that motion, that could be the motion to have what's written in the agenda summary, and then add in video licensing terminal in addition, and then see if that's supported by the council. Would be one way to go about it.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to work with the city attorney to prepare a draft ordinance to allow video gaming, creating a new liquor license classification with local restrictions, including a separate terminal licensing, and present the draft ordinance for consideration at the July 26, 2021 Public Safety and Finance Committee meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Alderman Kruszel and a second by Alderman Widener. Clerk, could we please have a roll call?
Alderman Wilson,
Aye.
Alderman Davalos,
Nay.
Alderman Berry,
Aye.
Alderman Kruszel,
Aye.
Alderman Goodman,
Nay.
Alderman Anderson,
Aye.
Alderman Widener,
Aye.
Alderman Ashour.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, on to number 3. Consideration of 2 amendments to the T-Mobile lease at the Country Ridge Water Tower. Public Works Director Phil Kugler.
Evening and thank you. T-Mobile proposed 2 amendments to its lease with the city for the Country Ridge Water Tower site. The first was to add a backup generator for which it will pay an additional $300 per month in rent, which is fair based on staff's research with other communities. The second is to extend the lease by 20 years. The terms of the lease extension are consistent with several other recent lease extensions with other carriers of the city's approved over the last few years. And I do have one note to make. The motion should be adjusted to replace resolution with ordinance, since the original agreement was approved by an ordinance. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on this issue.
Okay, thank you. Go through the list. Alderman Anderson.
I have no questions.
Alderman Ashour?
No questions.
I have no questions. Alderman Davalos?
No questions.
Alderman Goodman?
Will the generator create any additional noise?
When it operates, it will create noise, but it would only operate in a power outage or when it gets tested.
Okay. I mean, I realize based on all the drawings that it's going to be appropriately screened, but you know, our residence is pretty near there, so if it's very noisy, it might affect neighbors. But is it going to be tested often? Is it one of those things where they have to go by every month and make sure it's still on?
I'll have to check and see. I would imagine it could be a monthly test to make sure it's running it appropriately, but I can ask that question and put it in next week's city council backup.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, Alderman Kruszel,
I have no questions. Thank you.
Alderman Widener.
Thank you. This is a long lease. What is the longest lease that the city has, and is it common to go out to 2444 with leases such as this?
Yes, typically the leases are 20 years. They usually go in about 5-year segments, but they typically are, the original lease typically 20 years, and then the extensions tend to be about 20 years as well.
Does this allow us to raise the rent after 5 years or 10 years or anything like that? Or are we locked in without inflationary adjustments or anything like that?
No, we're locked in, but there's an annual escalator that I can't remember what it is in this one. It's typically like 3 or 3.5%, where the rent goes up every year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Alderman Wilson.
No comment. That my comment was just answered with the escalation in the rent. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Brummel?
Thank you. I support the staff recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions before we get a motion? Okay.
This is Alderman Goodman. I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the City Council approve an ordinance, not a resolution, approving the first and second amendments to the communication site lease agreement between the City of Warrenville and VoiceStream GSM1 Operating Company, LLC.
Second, Alderman Ashour.
Okay, we have a motion by Alderman Goodman and a second by Alderman Ashour. Clerk, would you please read the roll?
Alderman Anderson?
Aye.
Alderman Kruszel?
Aye.
Alderman Davalos?
Aye.
Alderman Widener?
Aye.
Alderman Ashour?
Aye.
Alderman Wilson?
Aye.
Alderman Berry?
Aye.
Alderman Goodman?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. On to number 4, consideration of city logo format on the water towers. Director Kugler, please.
Thank you again. You may recall the city is going to be painting the water tower that's on West Street in Cantera next May. And city's also going to be constructing a new water tower in the next 2 to 3 years in the Southwest District. And the other 2 existing water towers will be painted in the next 5 to 10 years. So staff thought this would be a good time to work with the branding consultant and try to determine what the format and the color scheme for the logo would be on the water towers, because we want to make sure we get this right up front, since we'll be doing 4 of them in the next 10 years. The rendering included with the agenda backup materials is a white tower with the city logo, just a standard Warrenville logo on it. Consideration was given to adding the naturally to the logo. That does increase the vertical size of the logo though, and that'll cause the W and then the naturally to kind of creep onto the upper curvature and lower curvature of the water tower. Or to avoid that, you could shrink the logo, but then that makes it a little bit less visible from a distance. So staff and the branding consultant were recommending to use just the Warrenville logo as shown in the agenda backup materials. With that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you. Alderman Anderson, would like to start out, please?
No questions. I support the recommendation.
Okay, Alderman Ashour?
The recommendation makes sense. I agree with it.
Okay. I also agree. I'm glad that we were able to see a picture of this. I know that in the pre-meeting, we did discuss putting the word naturally on there. I can understand now where this would be difficult to be able to see from a distance. So I appreciate the work that was done here. Alderman Davalos?
Yeah, I'm sorry to see that naturally go. I understand it. I don't think this is a great representation of how cool that total logo is and how, but anyway, I understand why it probably has to be this way.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman.
Yeah, the branding work group worked hard on coming up with a good look, and naturally was certainly part of it, so it's too bad, but I don't see a way to get it on there in a good situation. And this is a very expensive paint job. I hope everybody appreciates that, you know, of all the decisions we're making today, this one's probably the most expensive. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you. Alderman Kreschel.
No comments. I agree with the recommendation.
Okay. Alderman Widener.
I agree with the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson.
I also agree with the recommendation.
Thank you. And Mayor Brummel.
Like others, I'm sad that we couldn't work naturally in. I think that's a really nice addition to our logo, but I do understand the technical limits of getting that in there, and I agree with the recommendation.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions, comments? And can we have a motion, please?
Alderman Goodman, I make a motion to recommend that the City Council approve the city logo size and color on a white water tower as shown on the attachments included with the agenda backup materials.
Second, Alderman.
I'm sorry, who was?
Alderman Anderson, second.
Is that Alderman Anderson? Did you? Okay, very good. I'm sorry. We have a motion by Alderman Goodman and a second by Alderman Anderson. Clerk, could you please read the roll?
Alderman Widener.
Aye.
Alderman Ashour.
Aye.
Alderman Anderson.
Aye.
Alderman Berry.
Aye.
Alderman Davalos.
Nay.
Alderman Krischel.
Aye.
Alderman Goodman.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Number 5, consideration of Verizon Wireless as the city cellular plan provider under the state of Illinois procurement contract. Assistant City Administrator White.
Thank you. As noted in the administration department work plan, the city staff has been evaluating options to switch cell phone carriers. We've been with Sprint for many years. In the last year or so, they have merged with T-Mobile, but we've had some call issues and service issues over the years. We have some booster equipment that's installed at the 3 buildings, which allows us to make calls and get data access when we're in city buildings through those boosters. Frequently things change and the equipment doesn't exactly work. Some have noticed that walking into the building and no longer getting their messages and emails, and then walking out of the building and getting lots of pings. So we have been looking at switching. We looked at AT&T FirstNet, T-Mobile, and Verizon Wireless. We went through tested phones at each of the departments, and ultimately, based on network reliability and access to devices and cost, decided on Verizon Wireless. They do have a state contract with the state of Illinois, which does provide for some discounts for us as a local community through plans and devices. No matter which carrier we chose, we would likely see an increase in plan costs, partially because we are adding device lines for tablets and additional smartphones, and partially just because Sprint, I think, tends to be a more cost-effective option than some of the other well-known carriers. But nonetheless, staff is recommending a switch to Verizon Wireless. The cost difference, it's approximately $9,000. It's hard to estimate because with cell phones, it fluctuates from month to month with the sometimes the plan costs and or the device upgrade costs, depending on what kind of promotions that they're running, or if there is a need for an additional tablet or phone that wasn't currently on the list. So we have attached in the backup material a quote from Verizon that shows some of the monthly costs for the plan. Currently, the device costs are at $0 because there is a first year discount, and there's also regular quarterly promotions on devices. So there are some that are free to the city, depending on what kind of device we choose, both in the smartphone and in flip phones and other types of devices. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Alderman Anderson.
I think the thing that surprised me is just, I view this more of a commodity business, and this is I think a 25% increase from the previous spend, if I understood that correctly. I think you indicated, so that just feels high. I think you indicated a lot of this 9,000 was in the budget, but not all. Is that correct?
So included in the budget is about $7,000 for additional tablets that are going to be added for both public works and community development that are related to functionality with the ERP out in the field. So the ability to view permits, inspections, look at work orders while out and about. So that 7,000 is included in the budget. That is for the device costs, not necessarily the plan costs. I do think that we have estimated high on some of the plan dollars here, but we wanted to be conservative because, again, there is some fluctuation in the month-to-month cost depending on the number of devices at any given time. So I don't want to say that 9,000 would be covered based on what's in the budget, because that is specific to the devices. Now, I think a large portion of that $9,000, at least in this first year, is going to be offset by that one-time incentive that's included in the quote of $15,600. But going year to year, there might be roughly a $9,000 increase to the total bill.
Okay, no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Ashour.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no questions. Alderman Davalos.
No questions, thank you.
Alderman Goodman.
No questions.
Alderman Krischel.
Do we know if a lot of times when you set up new service, they give you like a device or a tablet, with so many dollars you spend? Is that potential to use that $7,000 we would have spent on devices and just for budgetary line items, like, kind of even that out, or do you know?
So the $7,000 in the budget is specific to purchasing tablets from a third-party vendor, because Verizon doesn't sell the specific types of tablets themselves. They will provide the network card, if you will, for the device, but not the tablet itself. The phone costs that we'll incur with getting new phones for everybody, a lot of that will be offset by that 15.6. In some cases, the phones are at zero cost because of quarterly promotions. So for example, a lot of the rugged phones that Public Works uses will likely be at zero cost to the city initially. Some of the smartphones are being offered promotionally at, I believe I want to say it was $49.95 for like an S21, which is one of the newer Samsung Android devices. So there is a lot of promotional pricing where we could get free phones or significantly discounted phones. I will add, one of the reasons that we ended up with Verizon, and we were heavily considering between Verizon and T-Mobile, T-Mobile was not offering any kind of promotions on the cost of the phone. We would have had to pay outright for the phones. And if any of you have looked at cell phone prices recently, the newest, and greatest Android devices can be about $700-800 a piece. And you can either pay for that upfront, or you can have it split over a 24-month contract or bill and pay a monthly cost. So when you consider adding all of those device costs for roughly anywhere between 70 and 80 devices per month, that would have also increased our bill every month by a lot. So that was one of the reasons we ended up deciding on Verizon, was because they do have those promotional costs on devices that will end up saving the city some money in the upgrading and changing of devices.
Okay, thank you. That all makes sense. I have no other questions.
Thank you. Alderman Widener.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Wilson.
No questions, thank you.
Okay, Mayor Brummel.
I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Administrator Coakley.
Sorry, Chairman, I'm not going to prolong the meeting. I just want to reemphasize for the public that may be listening or that listens to the meeting later, Sprint is, as I think everybody knows, but I'm not sure, Sprint is no longer an entity. It merged with T-Mobile, but T-Mobile is now the company. And because of that, our system is not working the way it should and is not really being supported. So we need to change to a different vendor at some point. And it was really down to T-Mobile or Verizon. So there was going to, in my mind at least, there were going to be additional costs. And I think Christina and the group, she worked with a group from all the different departments to try to analyze what was the best to serve the needs of the city. And I think they did a very good job, and it didn't take a number of months, but it had to be done over a number of months given all the other priorities going on. And I want to thank them all, including Christina, who's leading a lot of different efforts and projects for us right now. But to me, that because of the operation and functionality or lack of functionality of the Sprint system that we're still nursing along, there was inevitably going to be a change. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will need a motion for this, please. Anyone? Motion?
I'd like to recommend the city council pass a resolution approving Verizon Wireless as the city's cellular plan provider under the state of Illinois procurement contract.
Second, Alderman.
Okay, I got Alderman Wilson, and then second was Alderman Anderson. Is that correct? Okay. Clerk, can I have roll call, please?
Alderman Chrisell,
Aye.
Alderman Goodman,
Aye.
Alderman Wilson,
Aye.
Alderman Anderson,
Aye.
Alderman Widener,
Aye.
Alderman Ashar,
Aye.
Alderman Davalos,
Aye.
Alderman Berry.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Number 6, consideration of the future of Ridgey Road and Barkley Drive. Director Kukler, please.
Thank you. Ricky Road and Barclay Drive are private dead-end roads off of Ferry Road, west of Route 59. The city's performed maintenance and road maintenance and snow removal on them for decades, and they were last resurfaced by the city 20 years ago. And at that time, there was an effort to make them public roads, but that failed because some of the residents were not willing to dedicate at that point in time. The roads are actually overdue for resurfacing right now, so now's the time to determine the path forward. City Council authorized the Ward 1 Alderman to work with staff on this issue in August of 2020, and then when Alderman Bevere resigned and Alderman Anderson came on, Alderman Anderson was assigned to take his place with our group. Staff coordinated with the aldermen and the residents to determine a path forward, and the path forward is for the residents to dedicate a road easement to the city so the city can own and maintain the roads moving forward. The residents would not be required to pay anything during this dedication, and nor would they receive any compensation for dedicating the road easements. The estimated costs for the city would be approximately $5,000 for the city attorney and a professional land surveyor to create the easement agreements. And then staff anticipates the road widening and resurfacing would occur in the spring or summer of 2022 with next year's road program. And we'd anticipate paying for that since these roads are not part of the CMRP. We'd anticipate paying for that with the state motor fuel tax fund balance that we have. And we would, should this move forward and the road easements actually get approved and recorded, staff would anticipate doing some patching and whatever it takes to get the roads through the winter this year so that we don't damage roads further with snow plows and that the roads don't damage our snow removal equipment either. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you. Alderman Anderson.
No questions. I just want to thank Director Kukler and Kristen and Alderman Ashour. Just really great work in pulling this together, in my view. No questions.
Great. Thank you. Alderman Ashour.
I'd just like to thank staff for their efforts. They really put it over the top. There were some rewrites and there was a lot of consideration working with residents. A lot of thanks to everybody.
Great. Yes, I'd like to thank the staff for working well and bringing all the residents together on this item. It's difficult to get people to, as we know with some other streets in town, that some people just don't want to cooperate. And actually, I think staff has done a wonderful job getting them to do that, to cooperate and work together. Okay, Alderman Davalos.
Yes, I'd like to agree with that. I actually did not think this would get done this year. I think this is wonderful. This is great work. And I'm just really excited to see it done and happy to see it done. Thank you.
Alderman Goodman.
Yes, a moment ago, I said that painting the water tower was probably the most expensive decision we would make today. It costs $150 to a couple $100,000 to paint a water tower on the cheap end. Despite the fact that this item lists only $5,000 in costs under the budgetary impact, I really had to throw in probably because of this item. You know, owning a road is expensive, so can we talk a little bit more about the actual budgetary impact and not just the $5,000 that are included in the memo?
Sure. I don't have the specific cost estimate, but my approximate cost estimate for resurfacing the roads, I think the two of them together might have been about $150,000 total for resurfacing and widening the roads. We're widening them to be 16 feet wide, so that we would be. So they are, I think right now 12 to 14 feet wide. We're going to try to widen them enough to, it won't be our standard, but we're kind of limited with power poles and restrictions out there. We want to widen them as much as we can to 16 feet wide, which is what makes them a little bit more expensive initially to perform road work on. Going forward, the resurfacing costs would be less than that. I don't have the square yardage in front of me, otherwise I could calculate it pretty quickly.
Okay, and you say that we have enough money in the state motor fuel tax fund balance to cover that, at least in the short term?
Yes, this first go around would be paid for by that, and then 15 years from now, if the CMRP should be accumulating money enough to pay for them, the resurfacing in 15 years.
Okay, because usually we try and list the budgetary impact when it impacts the CMRP, which acquiring new road certainly does. There was a recent piece of legislation that passed in the last couple of weeks at the state level, allowing state motor fuel taxes to be spent on bike paths and pedestrian improvements. I know that there's a restricted number of things that tax revenue can be spent on, and when you find a project, that's often, you know, sort of the lump sums that get taken out of that fund. It's not one of our major funds, so it's probably not a fund that most aldermen think about the financial condition of, but because we do have some outstanding large pedestrian projects that we would like to get moving and that we haven't located funding for, you know, I was very optimistic when I saw that legislation passed, because I thought, well, being able to use motor fuel tax funds for some of these projects might help us with stalled trails and path connections that we haven't immediately gotten grants for, like Route 59 sidewalks or the trail connection to Maple Hill. So if the road resurfacing here dramatically impacts that fund balance, I'd like to see those numbers. I'd be interested in just seeing where this puts us and to talk about some of the costs that might be spent in other ways, or what we had in mind for those funds. Just so when we agree to new large expenses, and I think that this is a long-term project that we've worked on for a good reason, and that there's a good reason to want these private roads to become public roads so that they're not in bad condition. But I just don't want people to think taking on additional large expenses like this is cost-free, and that there are no trade-offs involved in making those decisions, because we often make budgetary decisions like this in a vacuum, without any context and without any sense of what other things are going to be affected down the road. So I would appreciate a little bit more information about that to be presented to the council.
Administrator Coakley, you had a comment?
I was just going to ask if Phil has any clarity on the issue with the MFT money. There was some recent action which allowed, I believe it was the local share for state projects in their communities. I don't recall the details. It wasn't quite as broad as I thought it was initially. If not, we can bring back more information about that specific question. That wasn't the only question or part of that Alderman Goodman's point, but I think there's more to that particular program that we could present at a later date if you don't have that information now.
No, I don't. The only thing I would say is that I don't recall about MFT money for per se, but for there was recent legislation that said that for when IDOT is performing a road project on their roads, so it's an IDOT initiated project, that there used to be, just like on Butterfield Road, that if they installed a path, the local municipality, in our case, when that path went in, we had to pay 20% of those costs for that road. And there was recent legislation for that said that the IDOT has to pay for 100% of those costs and the municipality does not pay for their 20%. Now that doesn't relate to MFT legislation, so I'd have to research that a little bit to see, to understand what that was. But there was, John was talking about the recent stuff for the local share of IDOT paths or sidewalks in there right away.
Yeah, that's right. When the legislation passed, there was an awful lot of legislation that passed at the same time. I received a notification from a pedestrian and bicyclist advocacy organization that I sent to John that discussed both of these issues, the local match issue, which is separate, and also the MFT funds. So if he forwarded you that email from me, then you should have information about both pieces of legislation, or you should be able to find it.
Sure.
I think we have that. We'll go back and look at it more. I just wanted to see if there was more we could share tonight. Sorry. We'll bring that back later. Thank you.
Okay. Other than that, I am definitely in favor of this going forward, and I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Kerschel?
No questions. Thanks.
Okay. Alderman Widener?
No questions. Thanks for the effort on getting this done. I appreciate everyone's involvement and coming to a good resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson?
No comments.
Thank you. And Mayor Brummel?
Nice to see this finally resolved. Thanks to everyone who had input in the effort. Well done. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, can we have a motion, please?
I'd like to recommend the city council authorize staff and the city attorney to draft easement documents for the purpose of the city taking over ownership and maintenance of private roads, Rigi Road and Barkley Drive.
The second, please.
Second by Alderman Goodman.
Thank you. We have a motion by Alderman Ashour and the second by Alderman Goodman. Clerk, could you please read the roll?
Alderman Davalos?
Aye.
Alderman Berry?
Aye.
Alderman Goodman?
Aye.
Alderman Ashour?
Aye.
Alderman Anderson?
Aye.
Alderman Widener?
Aye.
Alderman Wilson?
Aye.
Alderman Kerschel?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Number 7, consideration of city code amendments on the refuse and recycling services. Assistant City Administrator White.
Hello again. In the backup of the agenda is an ordinance amending the city code regarding waste collection and disposal. As you might recall, in recent months, we adopted a new waste and recycling program and moved away from stickers or pay as you throw to a cart-based service. The city attorney recommended some changes to the code to better clarify the intent of how and the structure of how that program will work, and I agreed with her recommendation. So there are several changes to the code included in the ordinance, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Alderman Anderson.
I had no questions.
Alderman Ashour.
No questions.
I have no questions. Alderman Davalos.
No questions.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman.
Nothing.
Thank you. Alderman Crucial.
No questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Alderman Widener. Alderman Widener. I think we lost his connection. He might be trying to get it back at the moment. Alderman Wilson.
No comment.
Okay. Mayor Brummel.
No comment, thank you.
Okay, we'll go back to Alderman Widener. Can you hear us now? Alderman Widener.
I'm sorry, I got disconnected.
Okay. Comment?
I have no
Alderman Widener?
comments. Nothing.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Goodman, you had your hand raised?
No, I was just waving in case he couldn't hear us.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right. We need a motion, please.
Recommend City Council pass an ordinance modifying Title 6, Chapter 2 of the City Code.
Second, Alderman Crucial.
Okay, we have a motion by Alderman Wilson and a second by Alderman Crucial. Clerk, could you please read the roll call?
Alderman Goodman,
Aye.
Alderman Anderson,
Aye.
Alderman Widener,
Aye.
Alderman Wilson,
Aye.
Alderman Crucial,
Aye.
Alderman Berry,
Aye.
Alderman Ashour,
Nay.
Alderman Davalos.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next is discussion to implement paperless public meeting packets. I'm the one that brought this forward, mostly because probably since last August, late August, early September, I've, just like the rest of you, have done everything through the GoToMeeting. And, but I finally realized that I didn't need all that paper, since I had to come in and pick up my paper because I live in a condo and I didn't want the papers to be sitting out in front of my doorway with when somebody could just come and pick them up. So I thought there's got to be a better way to do this. So I, of course, got a computer, which I didn't have before. I was trying to do everything on my phone, and I didn't have, and I had a very small tablet. So I did get a computer, and I got a big enough screen that I was able to do everything on my screen. Do the GoToMeeting, split my screen, and then at the other, on the other side, actually pull up the information which was on our website. The only thing I wasn't receiving from the website was anything that was a closed session. I realized that we really need to save a tree by not printing all this paper. We've been doing it for a year and a half. We've printed an awful lot of paper, and we've had staff through the police department deliver these packets individually to all the different aldermen. This has become very costly. So I'm thinking that we have one step into the future here, and we need to put the other, our other foot into the future. So I've asked Christina to help with finding out information about going paperless. How do we do this? So Assistant City Administrator White, could you please kind of help us along here?
Sure. So there are a lot of options when we talk about the topic of electronic agendas. This has come up before. What we're really trying to gauge here from the council is, first and foremost, is there a desire to look at going completely paperless with agenda packets? And right now, what that means is the current process of emailing a PDF copy of the packet and then also having access through the city website under the agenda center. That essentially covers question one of, if we want to go paperless, is that format, does that current format work for everyone? And is there a desire to go paperless? I think we need to answer that question first before we get into potential device needs or other aspects of this. If the council wants to go further than that into reviewing other forms of electronic agendas or other possible applications or software, that gets a lot more complicated. There's a variety of possible options to explore. So staff would need some guidance from the council about what kind of issues or objectives we're trying to accomplish with going even further with an electronic packet. Because again, there are so many options that if we just say go research electronic agendas, we could do that for months and months and months and have all kinds of different options without knowing really what the goal is in mind. So first, I think I'd like to get some indication from the council. Is there a desire to go paperless and not have paper packets produced?
Okay, we'll go through the list. Alderman Anderson?
Well, I am the old dinosaur. I do love my paper. I like taking notes on paper. However, in every one of my other worlds, we have gone paperless, and I've had to adapt to the new way of doing things. So, I'm certain that I could make that work. If I had an ask, it would be making the whatever we call the front section, the memorandum section, if that was a separate document, so you could easily print that out, so you at least had one working thing for notes, and then keep the other bigger PDF that you would scroll through to read the details. That might be helpful. But other than that, I don't have any further comments, and I would support it if we went in that direction.
Thank you. Alderman Ashour?
Well, I'm frequently someplace where I don't have internet on the weekends, so the paperless would be difficult. I take my packet with me wherever I am and take the time to read through it, and I may not be able to do that if it was on a laptop or computer.
Thank you. Alderman Davalos?
Yeah, I'm sort of the dinosaur too with the paper, but if I could print out that beginning section, because even now I have to have different piles. So if you're going to make a motion, I don't want to scramble back through to find that page. I'd rather just have that in one pile and and everything else. But it doesn't have to be paper, the other part, but it does have to be in a way that I can print out the pages I want. Thanks.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman?
I am definitely comfortable with electronic format. I have been wanting us to move in this direction for years, as most of you know. I think the idea of separating the agenda summary out to a separate document sounds very logical. I think that makes a lot of sense. I would put in one request, which is to ask that staff stop putting pages in sideways, which does make review on a computer screen dramatically harder, and especially if you're looking at it on a very small device, which automatically rotates things, it can be very difficult to look at small things when they twist sideways and don't want to be read properly. And that's often the case where like the cover page is in one orientation and then say all the documents within it are financial and are sideways. Just put the cover page sideways. It's okay to occasionally have memos in landscape instead of portrait. So that would be my feedback, just to make things easier to view electronically. I think wasting staff time printing all of this out and hand delivering it out to everybody, not to mention the cost of all the printing and the lack of green effort, is a little bit sad. When I went to the IML conference 3 years ago now, there was a question at the Aldermen's Roundtable: how many of you have a tablet or device for reading your packets? And 80% of the hands in the room went up. So we are, and the IML mostly has people from very small towns that come from all over Illinois. Warrenville is actually a big city by comparison, and the fact that we're still using paper, and these smaller rural communities have already gone to tablets. I don't know, maybe it should be embarrassing. I'm not sure, but maybe some people might think that. Okay.
Thank you. Alderman Krishel?
Yeah, thanks. I'm okay with it. I mean, I'm mobile all the time, and so a lot of times I'll grab the PDF on my phone or laptop or whatever. So I'm comfortable either way. The question I have is, does it have to be all or nothing, right? Could I opt in, or any other alderman say, hey, you know what, you can send mine, you don't have to deliver, don't print mine and deliver it. Is that a possibility, or does it have to be, we're going to do it for everyone or no one?
Assistant City Administrator White.
If we are talking just specifically about paperless packets or just having electronic PDF packets, it could be an opt-in for individual elected officials, and others can choose to continue to get paper packets. Once we start talking about, though, potentially adding city-owned devices and what those devices might look like, if they're stationary here at the dais, if they're things that are mobile, that like a tablet that's going home with you, that might become a little bit trickier, but certainly something we can discuss.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'd be comfortable with my own device and a PDF. I guess my ask would be, there's a lot of pages in here, and to scroll quickly to find what you're looking for, if we can make the agenda items clickable, right? So you click on item number 8 and it takes you to the appropriate backup material. That's very helpful. I don't think it takes much time to actually do that when you're creating the document, but I think having a trail of being able to click back and forth and then get back to the agenda is very helpful. So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you. Alderman Widener.
Yeah, I like the idea. I like all the suggestions that have, all the positive suggestions that have come forward regarding this. The thing that I think about that I would have most difficulty with would be when we get plans and blueprints and things like that in our packet. It's much easier to have a hard copy where you don't have to squint to see it on a computer screen and spin it around and locate it. So I think with some changes or alternates, we could move in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson?
I'm a paper person. You probably knew that, but yeah, I prefer that. But my secretary tells me that we could work it out. But just like tonight on, item number 2, there were 28 pages of material on item number 2. And trying to run all of those pages through on a computer, can I keep that separate with everything else that I have that on my desk? So I have a little question about it. I used to pick up mine City Hall every week, so it wasn't delivered. So I guess my basic question is, I like paper, but I understand we could make it work, if that's an answer.
Okay. And Mayor Brummel.
Alderman Anderson and Alderman Wilson basically we're able to articulate the way I feel. I'm a paper person too. I love it, but I will make the adjustment if necessary. And I think it probably is the time that we do that. We move ahead and save having all of this paper, a lot of which just gets recycled. So it's like when I had to switch phones from a regular phone to a smartphone, and I hated it at first. After a while, I got used to it, and now I would be lost without my smartphone. So seems to me this might be a good change. So let's give it a try.
Thank you. This is the information only. Assistant City Administrator White, do you have any more questions for the council that you need answered before you go forward?
Yeah, I do just have one clarifying question. Alderman Anderson, you referenced keeping the memo separate from the backup, and then there was reference to also having the summary separate. So I just want to confirm, when you're talking about memos separate from the backup, are you talking the summary, or are you talking about the individual memos that kind of start each agenda item and then the backup separate from that?
No, the first section of memorandum that gives us the summary of each item.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect.
Not the summaries that are in the back of the book. It just,
okay, that's perfect. Clarifies things. Thank you. Okay, and then the only other question then I have is, it sounds like everyone has at least access to a device potentially at home to view the packet. But in terms of when we get back to in-person meetings, which hopefully will be in the next few weeks, is the council looking to have something at the dais stationary to view those packets while at the meeting? Or do you intend to print them out yourselves or bring your own device? Because that will add a different layer to the overall proposal and recommendation that staff puts together. Because obviously if we're talking about adding stationary devices at the dais, there's a cost for that. And likely some installation costs, and I need to better understand if that's something that we're looking for.
Alderman Krischel?
My recommendation would be, if you had a device to bring it, I don't know if I would be introducing new technology. We often are visited by the technology gremlins, and so I would hate to have meetings, delayed and things go wrong if we could avoid it. That's my own personal opinion.
I guess, Alderman Goodman, one question on that. If everybody brings their own device and then there's a problem, staff might not know that operating system well enough to troubleshoot it. So if we have device problems during a meeting where someone can't access the packet, it might actually be easier from a logistics standpoint if there was one common system, as opposed to all of us bringing in our own laptops. I'll bring in my own laptop if that's what's the consensus, and it's certainly cheaper to do that for the city. But I wonder if the point that Alderman Krischel made isn't in fact reversed, that there would be more likely technical problems if we all are bringing in a bunch of different devices during the meeting that all have to work.
Bob?
Correct. I'm thinking since we have so many issues with when somebody has their phone on.
Yeah. Yes.
We get interference, I know, with the sound system. Would there be interference if everybody was bringing in their own, or would we all be able to get on the same Wi-Fi here? And would that help or hinder the sound system? That's a question.
So as far as Wi-Fi capacity, because the meetings are at night, generally we shouldn't have any issues with connecting devices to the Wi-Fi and having access to internet. The audio issues are just caused by having audio on your device that interacts with the audio system. So if it was a bring your own device type of situation, we would just have to get everybody used to shutting off the audio on the device so that there isn't an interaction.
Okay.
Alderman Berry?
Alderman Widener?
I just wonder if there's freedom of information ramifications if we brought in our own devices. For that reason, I think it would be good to have a city-sponsored device if, in fact, there are those freedom of information.
Good question. Okay, Alderman Anderson?
I think to Alderman Goodman's point, you know, a lot of city council's been doing this for a while. Somebody's probably figured this out. And if we just did a little bit of research to see how other councils are handling that, I think it's a great question. In my own environment, I've got 2 screens, and one screen I can have the agenda, and the other screen you can be sifting through the packet for detail. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, what would that look like sitting at the dais together? So I would ask if we could do just a little bit of work of some contemporary councils and see what they've done. It's always hard to invest in that much hardware because it ages and you got to replace it every 3 to 5 years, and it's just another kind of troublesome cost. But I think that several other points were made were pretty valid too, of what we run into if we're all doing BYOD. So that would be my ask.
Alderman Goodman?
Yeah, when the 200 aldermen were sitting at the IML meeting I was at a few years ago, almost all of the people who had devices that were owned by the city. That was a question that was asked, everybody showed their hands. So anecdotally, based on a couple hundred aldermen a few years ago, the city tends to own the devices.
I was thinking that for me personally, I don't have another device other than my computer at home. And I know because we were doing the GoToMeeting, it was easy for me to split my screen, like I said. Now, obviously, if we are back here at the location at City Hall, really the only thing we will be bringing up is the agenda itself. So we no longer have to see everyone's faces on the screen. So it'll be a little easier. We can actually, if we get a big enough device, a laptop or whatever, to be able to still even split the screen here to be able to pull up the summary and also the individual items. So any other questions?
I would just offer my observations. I think the best way to do it is to have city-owned devices that are all the same. That makes sense to me. I go to meetings a lot of times at the county and stuff where on the main screen, everything is up on the main screen so that you can see it. And then you've got your own device so that you can use to your own preferences as to what you want to look at. But the agenda and some of the backup is provided up on the screen so anybody at the meeting can see it without a computer. So it seems to me there's a way to do this that saves the paper, protects, I guess, our personal devices from being accessed because we use them for a public purpose. That is, I think, a very real concern that we need to make sure that we're insulated from that with our personal devices. It just, my sense is that the council meetings that I've remember being at where everyone had a device, it was provided by the community and they were all the same. So that would be my preference.
Okay, thank you. All right, are you good?
Yes, I think I have enough information to do some more digging and research. Now, with that, I will say that this project would be added on to the current list of projects, so it's likely that I'm not going to be able to tackle this right away with the contracts and other things that are ongoing. So my request would be to add this as a project to the fiscal year 23 work plan, and then certainly if we can get it done sooner, we will, but that'll give us a chance to do some additional research, get costs for devices and all of that into the 23 budget and give us a little time to dig deeper.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. At least we were starting the discussion early enough in the year that we could possibly be able to get this on the budget for FY23. So Administrator Coakley.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, I think it's a good time to just make a point in the interim, as has been noted a couple of times, by the end of June, it is most likely that we will no longer have the Open Meetings Act exemption, and we'll be back in person for all the aldermen that can attend, if, with the possible exception of traveling for business or if you're ill or taking care of an ill person in your family. But I would expect everyone would be here again in person because we'll no longer have the ability to do this type of meeting. At that same time, it has been my planning and thinking we would revert to the system we used to use, and that was for the short term until we get to paperless. We would have the paper packets produced and they would be in the alderman's office, and you would come and pick them up again. So we would no longer have someone from police delivering them. Now, council can redirect that, but I've also heard comments tonight that that seems like an extra burden. That's probably a waste of the police time and cost. And it was done because of COVID, because we couldn't have people coming and going to the building in the early months, and ongoing and ongoing and ongoing until we're at a point now where the building is wide open and you would all have access freely again. So just kind of a FYI on that, coming things probably starting in July. We'll keep you informed as what we hear from the governor's office, but that's how we anticipate it right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Number 9, informational presentation on continuing City Hall enhancements and functionality post-COVID. Administrator Copley.
Thank you. On the same topic of unraveling all the COVID changes that we needed to make, it was, as you all know, everybody lived through this in the country, in the world, in the city. It was a daunting task to stay on top of and not get too far behind or get behind on everything we had to do when we had to do it. So we made many changes. We are opening up and reducing those as we go forward incrementally, which is a little more thoughtful and pre-planned than the way we had to put them all in place. But 2 of the things that we have found at the City Hall that have worked really, really well, and it would be my intention to have them ongoing. And as I note in the summary, I think it's within my authority that you've hired me to do as overseeing the services and operations of the city. But because they're at City Hall and a little more higher degree of sensitivity than maybe something we might do at the garage or in a different place in the city, I want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with that. So I want to discuss them tonight. The 2 major things that we would continue are we put up windows, or at the time we were calling them barriers. So there was a separation physically between the employees and the customers at each of our 3 counters in the city. Primarily, the primary counters are community development and finance, but also the one that we have up in administration. Primary because that's where most of our people go to for service. At the time they were put in I believe was in March of 2020. I worked with the Public Works facility supervisor and said, go out and get the plexiglass, whatever you can find, and put it up. Try to make it better than you see at the retailers, where they have like a 1 foot wide little barrier for the poor cashier that was working there. We need a substantial, for lack of a better term, sneeze guard, so that we're protecting both sides, whether our employee had something or the customers. And then of course we were closed for a while, but before we reopened, we had those in place. Those have been very effective. The problem is the only plexiglass that was available at that time, because everybody, every business, everyone was buying it, was a 1/4 inch plexiglass, and we were very fortunate to get that. Doug Egan is our facility supervisor. He installed them. I also gave him instructions, please make them look like they belong there and were originally put in. So he did a really nice job of making them look appropriate. I don't know if any of you or all of you have had a chance to visit our lower level or come in upstairs and see the counters. If need be, I have a couple of photos I took way back when that I could share with you, but they do look really nice. The problem is if you really pressed on them or bumped into them, that little plexiglass, you can see it even, I don't know the right term, shimmers, wobbles when the door's shut and open just from air currents. If you tap on it, it wiggles because it's really thin. It did the job of protecting people from germs, but it's not really a durable long-term solution. Because they look really appropriate and good, I have spoken with Doug, our facility person, about changing those out with tempered glass. He went and got a quote just to talk numbers, and it is in the packet. It's only a few, I've lost my place. It's less than $2,000. I think you said just about $1,800 for a company to buy the appropriate pieces of tempered glass and install them in those. Now, that's a low amount of money that would be basically covered under maintenance. We either have to take those completely out or replace them with something durable. They're just not going to hold up forever in the way that they are. So it's a fairly immaterial amount of cost, non-material amount of money to make those durable, and then they would be there for the future. Second item is just about the entrances of the building. This is something we struggled with since the day we came up with the idea. I remember when Ron Menser mentioned, let's have the two entrances. We can build it at the hill, and we were designing the building way back in, I think, late 98, 99, and of course in 2000, and then the building got constructed. We had the two entrances. The problem has always been that the upstairs entrance off of Stafford Place has not been staffed. At one time, we had a part-time reception person upstairs who helped with scanning and some other work, who could give some answers to questions and direction, but that position was eliminated during the Great Recession. We have not filled it. It just wasn't utilized most of the time. Most of the questions coming up here are, where do I pay my water bill? Where do I pick up my permit? Where's the library? Where's the post office? Some very simplistic questions that can be answered anywhere in the building. During the last 14, 15 months, we've had the Stafford Place entrance closed to the public, with the exception of night meetings, which it's required that any board, commission, council, committee of the whole, it must be open because of the Open Meetings Act, of course. And then during the daytime, when the administrative adjudication kind of traffic court we have for those different types of parking and other citations, that's open during the day. So what's I'm suggesting here is that we continue to have that door closed during the daytime at Stafford Place, open during the evening, direct all the customer traffic, whether it's developers, whether it's visitors to City Hall, whether it's our residents paying bills, to the Manning entrance where all of our business operations are during the daytime. On rare occasion, there is someone coming in for a meeting. They have a meeting with the mayor, they have a meeting with the administrator or something else. They would be stop at the finance counter, they would be directed up, they can call and let us know they're up here. We would operate during the day much as if we were an actual two-story building without an entrance on a hill, which does still confuse some people. Additionally, any daytime meetings, special events or adjudication or something else that's happening here, we could have that door unlocked and have people come in, certainly. And just to clarify, this is the question I get most often when I mention this to aldermen. Any elected officials, appointed officials, city staff with the key code that you all have can come and go through any of the doors that have those, whether it's Manning or Stafford, to pick up your mail, to come in to talk to staff or whatever you need to do. You can still park on Stafford and come in with even that remaining closed. It has worked very, very well. Actually also is less disruptive to our executive assistant when she's putting together a packet, whether it was Anna or Donna or Josie or Alma or Dawn, all the folks that have had that job through the years. There's certain days they're putting together, compiling the minutes from a committee of the whole meeting like this, or compiling a packet or some other administrative work. Someone would pop in, they have to go up and talk to them. Often it's a very simple question. 90% of the time, as I mentioned, where's the library? Where do I pay my bill? If we're sending people in the actual business entrance, which is Manning Avenue, we eliminate that, and actually I think it's better customer service because it's more friendly. So long and short, we would simply change the wording on the doors to have Stafford Place, as it says in the packet, would be the public meeting entrance, and the Manning Avenue would have the business entrance, and the hours would be 8 to 5. Upstairs, it would say that business, daily business or something like that. We're working the wording out exactly. Use the Manning Avenue entrance. Anyway, there probably are questions, so I will stop with that long, short introduction. Thank you.
Alderman Anderson, questions, comments?
No, I think it makes perfect sense.
Okay. Alderman Ashour. Alderman Ashour. Okay, we can go back. He might be off at the moment. I'm fine with the recommendations. That's my comment. Alderman Davalos?
Yeah, I'm okay with this. My comment is parking. So I'm assuming if you work downstairs in your staff, you're around the side of that Manning. You park on the side. of that building at Manning, and if you're upstairs staff, maybe you're over by the old city hall or something. There's so much more parking on the higher level. And I don't know about flow, but if you have people coming for meetings and stuff, is there enough parking on that lower level, do you think? Or to accommodate all that? Or do you think all staff should be parking on the upper level and taking the elevator or the stairs down? I just want to make sure there's safe parking, enough safe parking down there if multiple people are down there or groups of people come in. That's all.
Administrator Coakley?
Currently, I'm not recommending any change to the way the staff would park. Currently, there's 4 of us that park on the upper level, usually in the Stafford Place by the old city hall, but next to the gazebo, really. It's closer to the entrance. And that's, if the mayor visits or comes to city hall, doesn't visit, comes to city hall for something, usually parks right in front of the building. A city clerk would be the same. Most of our staff parks on the Manning side, either in the parking lot that's kind of between parts of our building, right off Manning, or across the street on Manning over by the AT&T little switching building that's over there towards the entrance where you go to the Park District Rec Center up Manning. So I don't think that would change anything in terms of parking. And there's ample street parking on the Manning side for any customer traffic, which is, you get a handful of people at a time, or a few developer representatives, maybe half a dozen at maximum, might come in to meet with community development staff. Bigger meetings would be up here in the council chamber, the gallery, and then we would have the door open because we know there was a bid opening or some kind of a larger type event during the day.
Yeah, as long as there's enough handicap parking. I don't like it that people have to park on the street. I'd rather have them have a drive-in spot somewhere. So I guess it's okay. I mean, I'm going to vote yes for this because you guys have all the experience, but I do think there could be issues with parking downstairs. You know, maybe they can park in the library parking lot and walk over or something, but it's kind of a long walk. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman?
I see Alderman Ashour is on now, if we want to go back to him first.
Okay, Alderman Ashour, you're back.
No, I'm fine with the suggestions.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Goodman.
Okay, my only question has to do with public use of the gallery room and other meeting space. I know, for instance, my mother belongs to a club of artists that sometimes uses a gallery room for afternoon gatherings. I think if it's on the weekend, she's usually like given a key or a code or something like that. But are there public activities like that where it's open to the public and people come in and the doors are open, or is that going to be impacted by this change?
The current use of the public use of the building would not change. Those type of outside meeting rooms, homeowners associations, service organizations, whoever that has been using the building in the past, we stopped that during COVID, but would be able to come in, but it's all after hours. We don't have those type of groups meeting during the workday, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. So if it's on a weekend, they would have the same access with a key, but they could use the Stafford entrance. The council chamber, the gallery, the lobby on the Stafford entrance are all the public meeting spaces that were designed in the building originally, and that would not change. And they can all access from the Stafford side. They would have to. We would not have Manning accessible at those times because then people would be wandering through the whole building when it was closed.
Okay, and I assume we will be going back to allowing public access of those meeting rooms, especially once the governor's declaration expires, or maybe thereafter. Do we have any sort of idea?
We have just started those discussions about how to handle those. The intent is, yes, to have meetings back here, but we've got to figure out how to do that. And there's some background things going on. We've added a commission in the interim. We had Tunes of Glory here Wednesday evenings. We're trying to figure out how that will work. So during June, we have not opened that up yet, but we will be doing that shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Krischel.
I'm good, thanks.
Alderman Widener.
Thanks. I think it's a good idea. I think limiting access to one entry point will provide a safer atmosphere.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson.
I'm in favor of it. Sounds good to me.
Thank you. And Mayor Brummel.
Yeah, John and I had this conversation a while back, so I've had some time to think about it. And I think the important element here is that people tend to come in the upper entrance looking for a service that's being provided at the lower entrance, and it is a distraction for staff that's trying to work that goes on throughout the day that could easily be eliminated. And I think most people would, with new signage and with the door being locked, would realize, oh yeah, I've got to go downstairs for that. And after a couple tries, they'd figure it out and it would get smooth again. It's like any change. People are going to have a little bit of difficulty at the beginning of that change to get used to it, and they'll grouse a little bit. But once they're used to it, then all those water bill people and the permit people and the developers and everything will automatically go to that lower level. And that'll free up staff upstairs not to worry about having to deal with people that are wandering and saying, hey, where do I go for this? It'll be more clear where they go for it. So I think this is a real positive change. And I thank John for thinking it through and bringing it forward. And I hope the council embraces it.
Thank you. Okay. Let's see. That was information only. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. Number 10, on consideration of East Side Storm Sewer easement. Director Kugler.
Thank you again. Staff has been working on replacing some city storm sewer on private property over the last 3 years. And that storm sewer generally runs from where it discharges at Warrenville Road to Virginia, to Lorraine, and then to ultimately to Wilbur Avenue. When that storm sewer was originally put in decades ago, there were no easements obtained. It was put in by the city, and things were just different back then as far as how things were handled. So there were no formal easements obtained for that storm sewer. Staff worked with the city attorney to develop a standard easement agreement for the 7 properties where easements were required, and there's an exhibit in the agenda backup materials that shows those 7 properties. We're currently working with the property owners to obtain signatures from them, and so far we've got 4 of the agreements signed at this point. And this is another item where the city attorney pointed out to me that the easements are typically approved with an ordinance rather than a resolution. So if somebody makes the motion, then resolution should be replaced with ordinance again in this situation. And I would like to point out, touching on the paperless packets, that this was an item where when I was talking through with Brooke on how to approach it and whether we should use a standard, we arrived at putting the standard, like the template easement agreement in here in the backup materials, rather than all 7 easements. If I'd put in all 7 easement documents specifically for approval, it would have been like 80 pages worth of agenda backup materials that would have been printed out for everybody's packets. And so I was happy that Brooke agreed with me that we could put in just one standard easement agreement, because they don't vary except for changing names and addresses and PIN numbers and things like that from property to property. So it was one example where we're actually able to make the packet shorter, but oftentimes when we have agreements and things like that, it's not quite that easy to shorten it up. There's usually what gets included in there. It needs to be included in there because you guys need to review it and consider it. So anyway, that's just a little aside. It's not really related to this item, but anyway, I'd be happy to entertain any questions about this item if anybody has them.
Thank you. Alderman Anderson.
No questions.
Alderman Ashour.
Thanks for good work.
Thank you. I have no questions. Alderman Davalos.
No questions, thanks.
Alderman Goodman.
Seems very straightforward, thanks.
Alderman Kreshel.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Widener.
No questions, thanks.
Okay, and Alderman Wilson.
No questions, thank you.
Okay, Mayor Brummel.
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, very good. We need a motion, please.
This is Alderman Goodman. I would like to make a motion to recommend that the City Council approve an ordinance approving and authorizing the execution of easement agreements substantially in the form attached and in a final form approved by the City Administrator with private property owners relating to storm sewer improvements on Virginia Avenue, Lorraine Avenue, and Wilbur Avenue.
Second.
Ashour.
Okay, we have a motion by Alderman Goodman and a second by Alderman Ashour. Clerk, could you please read the roll?
Alderman Wilson,
Aye.
Alderman Davalos,
Aye.
Alderman Berry,
Aye.
Alderman Krischel,
Aye.
Alderman Goodman,
Aye.
Alderman Anderson,
Aye.
Alderman Widener,
Aye.
Alderman Ashour.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Number 11, purchase replacement filter media for well number 10. Director Kugler.
Thank you. The city uses a material called filter media that is used to filter our water before it enters the city's water system. The specific type of media that is used as part of a permit that the city obtained years ago from the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. And it's a proprietary material that it's only available from one supplier. Staff did research over the last year, possibly changing filter media, which would have required a city to apply for a permit from the IEPA to change that. But the results of the research that we did indicated that the current media actually works best to filter the city's water, and it's actually more cost effective than other alternatives. There was one that was probably closest in quality that was twice as expensive as the media we use. Staff did not advertise for bids since this is a proprietary item, and there would only be a single bidder had we advertised for bids. I do want to point out that there is a separate $5,000 estimated $5,000 shipping charge because this material comes from California. That would be in addition to the $26,000 and $26,110 cost for the material. But the city pays that separately and arranges for that separately from the Filtronics proposal. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Okay, comments, questions, Alderman Anderson,
No questions.
Alderman Ashour.
Just that's our iron filtration media, correct?
That's correct.
In case anybody didn't know what the media was for.
Okay, I have no questions. Alderman Davalos.
No questions.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman.
When I was at the Public Works open house, there was a demonstration of a filtration media for iron. I know staff was working on putting together a test system, and they said it had saved us an awful lot of money. So I want to thank them very much for their hard work on that. I think, you know, it sounded like a huge amount of cost savings of being able to test that out in-house, and I really appreciate their taking the initiative to save the taxpayers some money. So please pass that along.
I will.
And I want to also make a point of complimenting them to their boss. So that's you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Alderman Krischel.
I have no questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Alderman Widener.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Wilson.
No comments.
Okay, and Mayor Brummel.
I'm good, thanks.
Okay.
I recommend the city council pass a resolution waiving the competitive bidding requirement for the city code and approving the purchase of new filter media for well number 10 from Filtronics, Inc.
Second, Alderman Goodman.
Okay, we have a motion by Alderman Wilson and a second by Alderman Goodman. Clerk, could you please read the roll?
Alderman Anderson,
Aye.
Alderman Krischel,
Aye.
Alderman Davalos,
Aye.
Alderman Widener,
Aye.
Alderman Ashour,
Aye.
Alderman Wilson,
Aye.
Alderman Berry,
Aye.
Alderman Goodman.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, number 12, Climate Action Initiatives Update. Management Analyst Kristen Youngmeyer, can you do the presentation on this?
Sure. So a list of climate action initiatives was compiled back in 2016. So I'm going to give a highlight of a few green projects and initiatives the city has recently accomplished. So if we look in 2019, public works staff, they completed 329 upgrades to streetlights, converting them to LED fixtures through a ComEd energy efficiency program. These upgrades included retrofitting 89 streetlights to energy efficient LED fixtures. It also included installing 240 LED streetlights. So by participating in this program, ComEd provided a financial incentive of $12,019 for the upgrades that the city made. They also provided some stats on the environmental impact making these upgrades have. So just to give a few, by making these upgrades, this was the equivalent of removing 112,632 pounds of CO2 from the air annually. You could also look at it as planting 60 acres of trees annually. To date, about a third of the city streetlights have been equipped with LED lights, and along with their energy and cost savings, they're also more durable and should last longer. Another project staff have recently completed in the fall of 2020, diesel particulate filter installations were completed on 3 public works vehicles. These filters can remove 80 to 90% of diesel emissions, and this the labor and parts were covered with a American Lung Association grant. And recently this spring, a high efficiency HVAC system was installed at the police station, which replaced a 20-year-old system. So further helping us make sure our buildings are being efficient. If we look at some of our commissions, the Environmental Advisory Commission was able to put together an Arbor Day event this year. They estimated around 60 cars going through where they were able to hand out tree samplings. They also continue their battery recycling program. The last stat I got was as of November 5th, 2020, they have collected and recycled 6,935 pounds of batteries. And if we look, I think they've been doing this program since 2011. Over the course of about 9 years, this is an average of 770 pounds of batteries recycled each year, which I thought was pretty impressive. We look at BPAC, or the Bicyclist and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. They were able to hold the bike rodeo again this year. They had about 73 kids come through to get their helmets checked, bikes checked for safety, and go through the safety course, so hopefully encouraging a community that's friendly to bicycling and alternative modes of transportation. And then just looking to the future, staff is still planning to evaluate a smaller scale solar project at that's being proposed, I believe, at well number 13. So those are just a few highlights. If you guys have any comments or questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Okay. Thank you. Going through the list, Alderman Anderson.
No comments. Nice work.
Alderman Ashar.
Great report.
Thank you. Also, very good report. There was one thing in here I do have a question on the this mosquito larvicide program. I know we did this, it says in 2018. Did we do this again in 19 or 20? Are we going, do we have any plans for 21, or was this a one-time thing?
We did not, when I believe this was administered through the county, I did look at it last year and it didn't look like they were offering it, but that's something I can check to see if it's available again.
Okay. I know that I live right up against the river, and a lot of people are saying they haven't seen too many mosquitoes, but they are there because the water is stagnant. The water's not flowing. And so let's see what we can find out from the county on that, if you could.
I can take a
Okay.
look into that for sure.
Thank you. Alderman Davalos?
Yes, thank you very much. This used to be a very small list long ago, and grows every single year. And thank you very much. I think this is wonderful. It's going to the EAC, which meets tomorrow night. I will be taking it right to them. So thank you very much. And this is great.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman?
Yeah, I'd like to take a copy of it to Warrenville and Bloom as well. So the next time that we enter American Bloom, we can just submit this as a big section of our application about green initiatives in town. It's a wonderful, concise summary. I did have a couple questions on the energy audits. It doesn't say what year we did that. And I know when ComEd came and offered, or no, it was, I think, NICOR came and offered free energy audits. They said it was something that we should do every 5 years or something like that because technology changes. So it doesn't say in item D when we had that done.
I believe that was 2017, and I probably could add that as something in the future. That is on our radar to, within the next year or two, have another audit.
Okay, great. And for T, the private solar permit prioritization, I know that the Community Development Department had a ton of applications and we're hoping that by making it a priority, we'd get more solar installations, but I guess that's 3 years ago now. So do we know if that succeeded?
I would need to look into that and get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Kershaw?
No comments other, I mean, this is 6 pages of really good information, so thank you for providing. It's all really good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Widener?
Thank you. Is this an annual report that's been produced before?
I think the last time it was updated was in 2018. It is something, I could try to have updated annually just to make it a little more frequent.
I think with the climate situation, it'd be worthwhile to do an annual report on this on an annual basis, and also maybe seek the EAC's support and involvement contributing to it. In some cases, when some of the headings, I don't know whether the metrics are all provided that I would like to see, and whether the initiatives were mandated or whether they were voluntary on the city's part. And then, like with the tree planting and everything like that, that's where I'm talking about the addition of some metrics so that we know how many trees we planted, what varieties, and what else we did in the way of natural areas development. It would be good to know, too, the square footage of, as we had permeable pavers in the city, I know we had a great reduction of permeable pavers when we took out Warrenville Road, but it would be good to know as we add things back in there what the square footage is. And then I hope to see some additional solar projects. I know Alderman Wilson and I have been touting this, and Naperville has just got involved with a huge project, and I would like to see the city of Warrenville become a leader in this regard and pursue some additional solar projects. And that's all the comments I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson?
Well, just as Alderman, yeah, I'd just like to see more solar. I think it was a great report. I love to hear it, and it's really good. But I think it's like 6 years now we've been trying to get some solar for the city of Warrenville. And other than these speed limit machines that we have that is solar operated, I sure would like to see more solar. Thank you very, very much for that report. It was really good and really exciting.
Thank you. Mayor Brummel?
Thank you. Thank you, Kristen. Just a question on the battery recycling program. It seems to me we had to suspend that a while back because of some difficulties. Do you know anything about that and whether or not we're going to reinstate it at some point?
I ought to.
Administrator Coakley, as an answer here.
Thank you. I'll jump in. It was suspended for a time because there were too many violations for the vendor that was handling it. I guess suspended our program for a time because batteries weren't prepared the way they should be, and there was too many things that were not acceptable in the program. The EAC did some re-education and notified everyone. It seems to be working again. It has been reinstated is the answer. It was reinstated sometime, I think, just prior to COVID, but of course, there's a gap in everything because of that pandemic thing that happened. But it is reinstated, and on the lower level of City Hall, across from the community development counter, is the place where people can bring batteries.
Great. Thank you, John. I just want to highlight to the people that are listening that recycling requires a certain amount of diligence on your part for it to work, and that we had to suspend that program because there were so many violations of the requirements of how the batteries were handled. So that means unknown hundreds of pounds of batteries got put in the garbage instead of recycled. This is true, of course, for our recycling programs at citywide. Please, please, please follow the rules so that we can continue to provide that service and make those things available for recycling. It is so important. Read up on what's necessary, do it properly, and we'll be able to follow through. So I'm glad we're back doing that program again, and I hope people will, again, follow the rules, and we can get hundreds more pounds of batteries recycled instead of thrown in a landfill. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Davalos, you had your hand raised.
Yes, I just want to reiterate what Mayor Brummel said. It is back. I was at the last day when it's the members of the EAC that are doing this, and it is extraordinarily tedious to go through all these batteries and tape them up and separate the lithium from the regular and put the ones that are corroded in different piles. And it's the little tiny button ones in different bags, and it takes a lot. And we have another day coming up. So I would just encourage everyone to just really follow the rules and help us out here, because it's a bigger project than it, when it's described. It's actually bigger to actually get these batteries to the recycler without violations. So just keep it up, but we are doing it again.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay. That was information only. And now into 13, our final review and file Public Works Department FY 2021 work program and decision package status report. Does anyone have any questions, or would you like me to go through the roll? If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. That way I won't have to go through the roll. Okay, I guess there are no comments or questions. Thank you very much. And we're only a little after 10 o'clock. All right, that ends that portion of the meeting. There's nothing under miscellaneous. We do need a motion to adjourn. Someone?
Alderman Goodman, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second, Alderman Krischel.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll. Clerk, if you could please read the roll.
Alderman Anderson.
Aye.
Alderman Ashauer.
Aye.
Alderman Berry.
Aye.
Alderman Davalos.
Aye.
Alderman Goodman.
Aye.
Alderman Krischel.
Aye.
Alderman Widener.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you very much and good evening.